at the annual meeting on 6th May this year.
Noted.
Can I ask the committee to note the standing delegations to me as chair as agreed at the annual meeting on 6th May this year?
Noted.
Can we confirm the minutes of the meetings held on 12th of March and 26th of March 2025 to be signed by me as correct records?
Agreed.
Can we note the completed, outstanding and closed actions arising from previous minutes of the committee and the additional correspondence sent?
Noted.
Can we note the recent actions taken by the former chairman of the committee under delegated authority following consultation with party group lead members to agree the committee's letter to the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime on commissioning, the committee's report to public order policing, the Met's approach, and the committee's report, A New Era, the impact of violence on girls and young people? Can I also thank the previous chairman of this committee for the work that she did on those previous items and the work over the previous year, I think 2 years. Yes, and thank you very much for everything that you did and the work that you put into it.
Agreed.
Thank you, Assemblymember Cooper. Can we note the response received from the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime to the committee's recommendation on the Mayor's draft Police and Crime Plan 25 to 29?
Noted.
OK, so we can now move on to our main item of business, and I'd like to welcome our guests, Kaya Comer-Schwartz, who is the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and Kenny Bowie, Director of Strategy and MPS Oversight at MOPAC. So the first questions will be about the acquisitive crime and assaults on shop workers. I'll take the first two questions. So, panel, good morning. How is MOPAC working with the Met to tackle increases in shoplifting and violence or abuse against shop workers? Deputy Mayor, perhaps you could answer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Assembly members will note, this is an ongoing priority for us. We've outlined high volume crime in the Police and Crime Plan as an area of focus. We're working with the police, and this area has also been requested. I know we'll be discussing the budget later on, but the Mayor's been very clear that high volume crime, including retail crime, needs to be prioritised in the additional allocation of the 32 million. So we have national, regional and MPS focus on this area. We really welcome as well the additional offence brought forward by the government in the Police and Crime Bill, outlining a new offence around shop workers if they're abused as part of an offence. We know that everyone should have a safe place to work, and we really think it's important that that this is brought forward through the justice system. We're working closely with the police through their Operation Retail to make sure that, which has happened, I believe, twice now, to make sure that we're getting to the root causes of that. We're segmenting the offences around shoplifting. We know that shoplifting tends to be prolific, both in relation to low-level shoplifting, sometimes related to substance abuse. So we're looking at that in the round around Operation Assure, Operation Yamata, as well as looking at the more organised crime shoplifting retail offences. We're also regularly meeting with businesses to make sure that we're getting their perspective, both in what they feel the police needs to do more of, but also what they can do themselves in terms of reporting, designing out crime. I recently met with Nike to look at some really quite stark videos that they shared around highly organised shoplifting. So we want to work with them in partnership as well as other retailers. I've spoken to been on a recent visit to Uxbridge to meet members of their retail community, looking at every business from florists to Sainsbury's to understand the kind of the insights that they have about the importance of making sure we're getting this right. So I want to assure the committee this is a top real priority for us to get these numbers down. We're as upset as the committee on the rise of them. I know that the Commissioner spoke previously in this committee about needing a reprioritisation of this area, and that we need to get the planning around the neighbourhood policing officer and the investigation support of the neighbourhood teams to make sure we have everything in place to get to see an improvement in this area.
Thank you. And can I say that it's quite nice that we've finally got an operation, something from the Met that does what it says on the box. The Operation Retail actually tells us what it does. Thank you. You talked about the legislation. Could you explain what the withdrawal of the £200 rule in terms of an effect that it will have on crime and criminality and the MPS's response?
Yeah, so previously the government changed the law in 2014 to make low-value shoplifting, where the value of the stolen goods was lower than £200, a summary offence, trialable in a magistrate's court, which effectively meant that it was seen as a lesser deterrent from that. The government now, I'm really pleased to have removed this threshold, which places a higher bar on that, and we hope will act as a stronger deterrence.
Thank you. And what feedback has MOPAC received from businesses about declining police attendance at shoplifting incidents, and in particular the impact that this has had on retailers' confidence in reporting these crimes? I think it's really stark when you go out and like I went to Westfield recently and talking to shop owners there, the need to see visible police in the area as a deterrent, but also to have good relationships with local officers. I think it's really important, and local officers want to be able to do that. They had schemes like Adopt a Shop, where officers kind of had responsibility for certain shops, and that seemed to be working well. And I think that those are the kind of things, through the new prioritisation of the neighbourhood plans, we want to see an increase of. We know that for various reasons, I was talking to a newsagent in Uxbridge, and she was saying, you know, she doesn't often report because it seems to be slightly minor at first, then, you know, it's young people, and then it escalates, and then, you know, when an officer comes and says, you know, has this happened before, and she's like 4 or 5 times, that's not where we want to be. So we really want to improve the confidence that retailers have to report, and part of that is them being assured that something's going to happen, and that's obviously important, that it feels like there's better communication back on what happens after something is reported, but also it's ensuring that we improve the criminal justice system so that it feels like there is a positive outcome from that reporting. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Morning, both. This is to the Deputy Mayor. What measurable impact has the Robbery Reduction Partnership had in its first year?
We've been seeing through the partnership a lot of positive initiatives, particularly one in the north of Lambeth, where which came out of the partnership, where officers were able to work with the retail community, and that has the action taken there has seen a reduction in offences and an increase in arrests. As I mentioned previously, it's really important that we get the arrests, because these are often prolific offenders. So, you know, the number of arrests can significantly reduce that. We did a recent kind of survey evaluation of the partnership, and all of the partners, especially, I think importantly in this conversation, the retail partners said that they were really positive about the partnership, especially the information and data shared that helped them focus on how to take community safety forward.
Thank you. Well, thank you. You've answered the second part of my question before I'd even asked it. Well, that's amazing. Thank you for that. What are the key performance indicators for the robbery reduction partnership?
I mean, we're working on the key performance indicators for the whole police and crime plan, and we want to make sure that that's aligned with the robbery partnership board going forward. So we'll be working that through currently.
How long have they been going for?
So, I mean, the key for all of this is it's no different from what's in the main outcomes for the police and crime plan. So we are looking at robbery as a whole as being the main outcome. Within that, what we've seen is that from the latest ONS stats, that's down 6% year on year to end of December 24, which are the last available stats. And if you look at year to year in terms of the more recent crime stats which we get access to, and which will probably come through in the longer term, that seems to have seen a further improvement to about a 10% reduction year on year of robbery of personal property.
So Kai, you're aiming for 6%, 10%. What you say you're working on it? What are they working at the moment? As far as you know, what do you look when you're looking at scrutinising what they're doing? What percentage are you looking at?
Well, we want to see obviously a decrease, but also a sustained decrease.
Yeah, what sort of percentage would make you happy, and what sort of percentage would you not be pleased with?
Are we talking about reporting or arrests and sanction and detection?
The actual impact, so the actual results of what they're doing. What are you looking for? What reduction are you looking for?
Well, I think given the volume of this crime, we'd want to see at least a doubling of where they are currently.
Which is?
So what we were at 10% at the moment, so 20%.
You're looking for 20% reduction. By when?
Well, I think this year we need to see that.
So by the end of this year, this current year, I can hold you to account for that, can I?
Well, that's my ambition, yeah.
Okie doke, thank you. What work has the London Retail Harm Reduction Partnership done to address the increase in retail crime, and what impact has that had? I think you've got that question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the MPS has set up this new...
I was actually asking the Deputy Mayor, sorry.
To clarify between our robbery partnership, but this is the Met's robbery partnership, so I just wanted to make sure. I think it's very important. It's got CPS, London Council's Youth Offending Service, Transport for London, the Safer Business Network, our own Violence Reduction Unit, and the British Transport Police. We're seeing an improvement of outcome rates since summer 24, an increase in retailers being confident in reporting and working with the MPS. We've seen, as I mentioned before, the decrease of reporting in Lambeth, a key operation with the top 20 offenders being arrested and 14 of those remanded in custody. It's also worth noting, as previously mentioned, that we've actually seen a reduction by 10% since April 2025. And another key thing that's come out of the partnership is that the CPS...
Since April?
Year to year. Since the CPS have been working in partnership on early charging decisions in Lambeth, Southwark, Sutton and Bromley and Croydon.
Okay, but if we look at robbery, theft, shoplifting, theft from the person, they're all increasing at a much higher rate in London than in England as a whole. So why do you think that is? What is MOPAC's assessment of why that is happening, Deputy Mayor?
We've had previous analysis with an academic partner, and obviously some of this is linked to cost of living, but as I previously mentioned, I think that it's really important that we segment what we're seeing. So, you know, where is this related to organised crime? That's something that's a key concern. Where is this related to lower level offences? And as I mentioned before, I think the introduction of a higher taking away the £200 threshold will hopefully be a greater deterrent in partnership with our work around improving substance abuse access. And so I think through that segmentation of the offences, we can really target and improve, as well as through the budget, making sure that we're clear through the Mayor's priorities that this high volume crime needs to be tackled, and making sure that the Commissioner has talked about making sure that they have the right investigation teams on frontline policing, so that they can make sure that they're tackling, getting the evidence correct in tackling these offences.
Yeah, but the budget's a disaster. We're coming up to that later. But going back to the actual question, which you haven't answered, why do you think it is increasing so much? There's so much of a higher rate in London than anywhere else. Why is it happening in London more than anywhere else?
So there's been a higher rate in
Deputy Mayor.
I mean, I think the statistics that we've seen across Europe show that, you know, capital cities tend to have higher volumes of these kinds of crimes, sadly. If you compare it to Madrid, we're actually less. But it's really important that we're making sure that we're doing all we can. We know that
yeah, but what do you think is the key driver? You must be asking yourself, why is this so much worse in London than, say, Manchester or Birmingham? What is the key driver that is making it worse in London? So when you ask yourself that and ask your officers, what is their answer?
So when we've looked at things around that, we look at obviously the cohort of the people who are offending. We know that that's primarily younger people, which is why we work with the Violence Reduction Unit to do more preventative work. We know as well that, as I've mentioned before, there's a link to substance abuse, so that's why we're working with the London Drugs Partnership to make sure that we are taking a public health approach to these crimes.
Yeah, but would you say there was a specific driver, or one or two specific drivers? That's what I'm getting at. What issues, what's driving this more in London than anywhere else? Because there's substance abuse elsewhere. There are younger people in other cities. So what do you think is driving this in London?
Well, alongside the socioeconomic factors that I just mentioned, I think, you know, we do also recognise as a capital city we have larger retail zones and areas, and that's why we're working through the Business Reduction Partnership to look at that. The government's given additional funding for hotspot areas, so we're working with the top 5 most affected boroughs to look at how we can both design out the crime.
How much money have you been given for that specifically?
Do you have that? I can get that breakdown for you.
Any idea, rough idea?
Not off the top of my head.
No? Because obviously it makes a difference. Working on hotspots areas is a damn good idea, but it depends how much money is being put into it, given the backdrop of so much money coming out of the Met Police, which we should all be ashamed of. So you don't know, so I'll get you to write to me about that then.
I think it might be a rollover in the region of about 8 million, but if that's wrong, Assemblymember Hall, I'll come back to you. But that's
8 million, and that's coming directly from government and not associated with...
Exactly.
If you could write to me, that would be really helpful.
I think that's right, but I'll come back.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Thank you. And if we could have that as a committee, please. Mr. Bowie, did you want to add? You looked like you wanted to come in there.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, obviously, if you look at the ONS stats around acquisitive crime, London has forever and ever been a bit of an outlier in this. In terms of hypotheses around what's driving it, one of the things which drive crime is available opportunity. Probably the daytime population in London is actually much higher if you think about it, than in other things. One is the level of tourism, two is the level of people coming in, so the level of opportunity is higher. And the second thing I think would be one of our hypotheses is that the prevalence of organised criminal activity in terms of especially theft and robbery of mobile phones may be higher in London than in other similar metropolises. So, well, not metropolises, but other sort of other cities across the UK. So those would be two of the thoughts around it. And also the Commissioner and AC Matt Twist have both acknowledged that this is an area where the Met does need to have a greater focus going forward.
Thank you, Mr Bowe. Could you bring the mic a little bit closer to you, please? Thank you very much. The next question is from Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you both. Let me start with the Deputy Mayor. Listening to you speak, right, let me qualify this. I had a long conversation with two different retailers. One is fairly large, one has a lot of different outlets. He was actually offended by the notion of adopting a shop, because he's saying, what happens if one of his shops is not adopted? And listening to you speak this morning, it would sound like retail crime has just cropped up on the agenda as important. Would you agree with that characterisation?
No, definitely not. I mean, this was an area of focus that I wanted to take up when I started this role 6 months ago, because of what I saw in my own borough. So definitely not. I think that the work that's been going on here in the Robbery Reduction Partnership for over a year shows that this has been a
but
focus.
That's robbery reduction. I'm talking about shop theft, not robbery.
No, and I recognise that, and I think that that's why in the police and crime plan we really pushed to focus on offences like shoplifting. So it's certainly not a new issue. I mean, the statistics that Kenny mentioned previously shows that this is an ongoing issue. I think it's just the Commissioner and AC Twist has also said that this needs a greater focus and reprioritisation, and that's what I'm keen to drive forward.
But that's my point entirely, notwithstanding the fact that you've arrived 6 months ago. I accept that, but the Mayor has been here for 8 years. And when you speak to retailers, they will say they don't feel like they had any focus on their issue, and now all of these initiatives have come. Some are welcome, I'm sure. But what will you be doing in the future to make sure it doesn't fall off the agenda again? Because your own statistics, the Met's own statistics, would suggest it's been horrible for a long time, but all of the flurry of action will suggest it's only now just being picked up by the Mayor. So what have you got planned to make sure that it doesn't slip off the agenda in the future?
I think Assembly Member Bailey, you're correct. We need to make sure that the actions we're taking are sustainable. I think that the refocusing of neighbourhood policing and community policing is very welcome in this space. I think making sure that the budget that we've allocated protects that neighbourhood policing. We know that this is definitely about making sure that we have visible policing in the areas, but it's also about making sure that there's strong partnerships and relationships in communities so that retailers feel confident and have those strong relationships with local police officers to report things and also share intelligence.
I agree with that, but I think my small sample of two were much more interested in prevention. So that neither of them have been particularly nervous about reporting, but they've been disappointed with the amount of support they get around prevention. One of them said that he felt that shoplifting below a certain point had been legalised, and he said that he felt the Mayor's absenteeism in that conversation justified that for him. So I'm saying, what are you going to be doing on behalf of the Mayor to send the message that actually shoplifting is not acceptable, and that something will actually be done about it? Because you used the words a reprioritisation, and they saw that as I use the words he used, it's a dereliction of duty from the authorities because they've allowed shoplifting to get to such a level, and they want a reassurance that it won't be able to do that in the future. They were both talking about removing shops or investing, and they were saying, how can they guarantee that the Mayor will focus on these things in order to drive shoplifting out, because they believe that it's become acceptable?
So I'm taking the question is how they have confidence going forward of the prioritisation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think they can be confident that it's writ large in the policing crime plan, that we are focusing on it in terms of the budget. I think that the focus that I'm in discussion with the Deputy Mayor for Business to make sure that we continue to have a long-term engaged insight from those retailers about some of the preventative things you've alluded to, making sure that we work directly with the police to hold them to account in this area. I'm very strident that this is an area of focus, that the Met have been given funding to tackle this issue and want to hold them to account to make sure that it is. And I think you rightly say, Assemblymember Bailey, that it's about the sustainability of this. We can't have initiatives. We need to make sure that we have a sustainable neighbourhood policing offer, and that's, I know we're coming on to the conversation later about making sure that that's writ large in the spending review as well.
Okay, thank you. How is MOPAC supporting the Met to deliver Operation Retail, and what impact has the new operation had on the reduction of retail crime? Because that's the crux of the matter. It's about a reduction now, isn't it? If you speak in certain parts of London, the word epidemic was used. How do we reduce it and keep it down?
One of the things that it's worth flagging from one of the positive things that has come through Operation Retail is an initiative to make sure that retailers can report as easily as possible and provide information and details through the victim contact desk on emails and so that the retailers get updated. As I previously mentioned, communication is key in this area so that retailers feel confident in reporting, so making sure that they're regularly updated on the offences that we have. In terms of MOPAC's ongoing pushing and evaluation of these areas, it's really through the Retail Reduction Partnership that we continually look at what the data is saying, what the insights is from retailers, and push for what more can be done, as well as using best practice from other forces.
And what does support and pushing look like from MOPAC to the police? Because again, I am most interested in the effect that MOPAC has on the outcome for Londoners. So when are you challenging the police? How are you challenging the police on Operation Retail, and also how are you supporting them?
So I would say in terms of challenge, we are doing that, looking at the data, asking those questions that Assemblymember Hall previously alluded to. So what should we be expecting in terms of reductions? When will we be seeing these? You know, the oversight questions that one would expect. What are you missing that isn't? And in the support section, I think it's both through support, obviously through finance and resources, but also making sure that we're highlighting where they do get it right. I hope all Assembly members have seen the recent communications, especially through social media, that the police have been doing to highlight where they have tackled criminals. It's important, I think, both in terms of deterrence, but also to build trust and confidence in Londoners that this is a priority area, and we will fully support them in doing that.
And finally, you talk about tackling criminals. A lot of rank and file officers were very upset with the mayor and TfL, and they're dealing with a ticket incident they had. We don't need to rehearse what went on there. I'm sure you're aware of what went on, but a lot of officers really felt like they weren't supported by the mayor, and particularly TfL. So what is MOPAC doing to make sure those frontline officers who will have to tackle people can rely on the mayor to publicly support them and privately? What's a conversation like between you and the mayor on that?
I mean, I see the mayor supporting officers regularly, praising the work that they're doing in frontline crime. I think that he's always been strident in his support for frontline officers. And I think that sometimes, obviously, as you all understand as Assembly members, when there's a live investigation going on, it can be difficult to comment on it. But it's really important that we know how difficult, we all know how difficult the work of frontline officers can be. Obviously, if there's reason that needs to be investigated, there are the right channels to do that through complaints and other procedures. But we definitely want to make sure it's important that London feels like it has a police service that is serving them, and part of that is trust and confidence. So we need to highlight continually where the police are doing great work.
Okay, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the subject of retail theft, I'm not sure if you're aware of a tweet which was put out by the Metropolitan Police within the last few hours. It's regarding thefts from Greggs. And I'll read it out to you. It says, banned from the bakery, and then it's got 4 emojis, 1 baguette, a croissant, a loaf, and a donut. This sticky-fingered thief had the half-baked idea to steal from Greggs 7 times until plainclothes police officers arrested him. He's now been banned from every Greggs official in England and Wales, ending his sausage roll era. Do you think that that gives the right impression to people who are considering going out shoplifting? That A, the sentences and the punishments are so limited, being banned from Greggs, and also that it's being treated really as a matter of fun by the Metropolitan Police's official Twitter feed.
I can see that. I mean, I'm not one really for joviality on social media. I think that, but I can see what they're trying to highlight, aren't they? They're trying to highlight that a prolific offender, someone who's 7 times, I think you said, has now been stopped in doing that, and that the awareness of that criminal means that that intel can be shared across the whole of the Greggs business. So I think, you know, that's an illustration of the Met trying to highlight the positive work they're doing around shoplifting, which other Assembly members have agreed this morning should be the priority.
Yeah. But you don't see the counterproductive nature of sending of treating it as a light-hearted event. Somebody who's a 7 times prolific shoplifter, all they get is a slap on the wrist, a ban from Greggs, which is going to be damn difficult to enforce, and then lots of you know, funny puns, emojis, and what have you.
Obviously, this is something that's happened today. I don't know that that's the only outcome from that case.
It's the only one that the public know about.
Sure, but I think it's also, I don't know, in a world where content is prolific, and I think that it's not for me to defend the communication teams of the Metropolitan Police, but I think they're trying to engage the audience in this important work that they're prioritising, and I think we all agree that shoplifting is something that needs prioritising. I can, if you'd like, we can go back and look at if there are other outcomes from that effect,
Well, it's not so much the other outcomes, it's the message that it sends more than anything else that I'm concerned about. Is that, I mean, shoplifting, as we've been discussing today, is a very serious offence. It also leads to threats of violence against shop workers. It can, not just threats of violence, actual violence. And then we see a social media post, which I agree is trying to highlight the work which is being done. But do you not agree that the work which is being done is undone? You know, highlighting that particular good work is undermined to a certain extent by it being treated in a lightly flippant way by the Met social media team. I
think it's really, I want to be clear that I have pushed the Metropolitan Police to highlight the good work that they have done in this area. So I don't want the good work that the police have done in high-volume crime. I hope you've seen a general uplift in the amount of communications, especially on high-volume crime. I think that that's important, because I think it's important for trust and confidence of Londoners to see that these issues that Londoners care about are being tackled. I do understand your point of view that the flippancy of it probably could be counterproductive, but I also know that, you know, in a busy communication marketplace, they're trying to get cut through.
Okay. If I have just a second supplementary, if I may, Chair. The retrospective facial technology has been used, and the Met's asked 12 retailers to provide images of their most prolific offenders, maybe including this man from Greggs. 302 CCTV images were scanned. What I'm interested to know is the criteria which was requested. I don't know if you have the answer, such as were they only asked for prolific offenders where violence or threat of violence was involved, and did they need to meet any particular thresholds before of criteria before these images were shared?
I don't have the. I believe it was just that's the priority and the prolific offenders. I don't know if there was any further criteria. I can check with the Met and come back to you.
If you could and get a written answer, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, just wanted to come back to the point around the Anti-Social Behaviour Crime and Policing Act of 2014, because you've spoken, I think, at length about possible changes to amending the £200 lower limit on shoplifting as a summary offence. Are you fully aware of why that change was brought in 2014? Do you understand the reasons why it was brought in?
I understand it was related to prison population and reducing that.
No. So it's to do with the fact that it made it you could have a police-led investigation. You could take cases forward quickly. So just to be really direct, this is talking about people that were acting as a legitimate customer, one-time offences, who are likely to plead guilty, and being able to avoid having to put that to CPS. Because this is quite we're not talking about these major people that do this for a living. This was talking about these kind of one-off offences and ways to prosecute quickly without involving the CPS. If that had been the reason for the uptick 10 years later in retail theft, I think we would have actually felt it at the time the law changed, not 10 years later. So I think putting that as the driver is a massive mistake anyway. But you haven't addressed the fact that if this change does come through, there's going to be a huge more weight on our police to put these cases of shoplifting through to the CPS, for the CPS to agree to take these to court, instead of what we can do now, which is quickly take these through police-led investigations.
I wasn't saying that it was a key driver. Assembly Member Ahmed asked me a specific question on it, and I was outlining the changes. I think that from what I've heard from officers, there is a real concern about not feeling like there is effective justice in this space, and one of the things cited was this, and that they believe that this will act as a higher deterrent, and that we do need to make sure that the investigating powers are stronger in this area, but also I reflect that we also need to see the improvements in the criminal justice system to make sure that this is. But I've heard from both retailers and the police that, not feeling like there can be swift justice in this area doesn't act as a deterrent. Retailers feel like, when they report, even if they're arrested, people can be brought back in the area the next day. And I think one of the other things that the Police and Crime Bill brings forward is bans from areas where offenders have been prolific in the past, and I'm hoping that will also act as a positive deterrent.
So let's be clear, 10 years ago the maximum punishment for this offence didn't change. It was 6 months. It remains 6 months as but what will happen, and perhaps it, because there's now attention on it, perhaps we can make it feel like it's more of a deterrent. Maybe that is a good thing, to make it feel like a deterrent, even though realistically nothing's changing, right? But if we can make it feel that way, that's good. But there is still the problem where if we change this, the onus is going to go back on police to present cases to CPS, and CPS to take those cases forward and to not have them delayed. What I have on my high street at the moment is cases where, when we do get some shoplifters, and it is a bit of a carousel and they come back, but we can quickly prosecute. This is going to have those offences now taking ages to get to Crown Court. that is going to cause something that has to be resolved in a Met Police which is already facing cuts. It's something to think about if you haven't already.
So I think it only makes it an either way offence rather than it doesn't actually remove the possibility of stuff going via the mags, I think, whereas the 2014 Act made it a summary-only offence, which meant it could only go to the mags.
I think, but that's it. But I think when you're talking about that specific case, and we're not talking about those repeat offenders or for the more value, right? These are talking about the ones that you want to put quickly through. The second thing that I wanted to come to, and I wanted the Deputy Mayor to answer that, not you, Kenny, but would you think about? So, can you think about what that might the onus that might have on the police and putting those cases forward to CPS?
Yeah, it's something that, as you know, that we, the wider criminal justice system is something that we continually look at because we need to see the improvement throughout the area to make sure that victims get the justice they deserve. I will take that forward, but I think the point of having the flexibility of going to both, and I trust CPS and Metropolitan Partners in their assessment of those things as the experts in that field to be able to have, but I think the greater flexibility is important. Trust
is important. I have trust in them as well. It's the capacity of the police and the CPS. And just one final point, if I can, Chair, is just around the security guard shortage in the UK. This is a massive issue at retailers, and I have to say, we are talking about the strain on the retailers at the moment, but a lot of big retailers are making the financial decision that they would rather take the shoplifting hit than hire security guards. It's hard to come by security guards. What kind of work are you doing to encourage more people, or to work with the other Deputy Mayor to encourage more people to take on the role of employment skills for security guard and to push retailers to properly secure premises?
Yeah, I think we obviously want to look at making sure throughout the retail sector that there's ways of preventing that. I know there's a great case in Boots and how they've literally made their shops kind of a lockdown area when this has happened, so they can really deter the offender within the shop. So we do want to continue to talk to retailers and the Deputy Mayor and look at how we can work to have preventative measures, and obviously security guards would be part of that.
Thank you. Before we move on, am I right in assuming that when the crime bill was being mooted and all the various elements were being mooted, that the criminal justice as a whole, system as a whole, including the police, would have been consulted widely on the aspects of it?
It's on. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to get really close to definitely, and also importantly, Assembly Member Ahmed, the Leveson review that is happening as well across criminal justice, but the sentencing bill is coming forward now, and there's active conversations across all of those areas.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. How are MOPAC and the Met working together to use insights gained from Operation Reckoning in January to enhance the Met's response to phone theft?
This is a really important operation, Operation Reckoning. We saw in January of this year 230 people arrested for committing 850 offences. So this is why we really want to focus on that high volume crime, because we know that a small amount of people can make a hell of a lot of damage. So we want to make sure we're getting that. And there were also 1,244 international mobile equipment identity numbers found within that, and we know that that's really important because that is something that we've through MOPAC, been able to work with phone companies and the police to track where those numbers end up, and we know through that this is a global issue. So it's really important. Also, that over 1,000 smartphones were seized through that operation, and 23 search warrants were executed. Also, something coming forward in the criminal justice bill is to be able, where evidence is prevalent, to do searches without warrant around this area. So we know that this operation is crucial to getting the evidence to do that. The second intensification Operation Reckoning running happened in between 23rd of April and the 7th of May, saw a further 292 arrests and almost 2,000 IME numbers come through, so, and 5 warrants executed. So we know when these operations are in action that they have really improved outcomes. A case study that's been highlighted for me is that one of the victims of this, we were able to use their Find My Phone app, and actually that was tracked to the offender trying to sell it on at a shop. So it's also making sure that we're working with our high street partners about making sure that we're not reselling on counterfeit goods. So it's about raising awareness of persons, something that we've worked closely with the mobile phone designers, both Google and Apple, is the work that they've been doing to create greater facilitation on their phone to block things when they've been snatched. So we want to make sure that we're highlighting the things that people can do. I've noticed that I've got emails even from my insurers listing those things, so those things are coming through so that we can, it's really important that we have ways of not being able to sell a phone on. So we're both working with the phone companies. This is something that we've worked closely with the Home Office on, but also making sure that operations like Operations Reckoning keep on going, and we're learning from the intel and data that we get from that.
Thank you very much. And 40% of all phone theft occurs in Westminster and the West End in my constituency. So is there any particular focus on central London and how we can kind of bring that number of phone thefts down there?
Yes, definitely. Those are key operational issues. I want to reassure you that Westminster Council are definitely part of the conversations we're having around the high volume crimes and the hotspot policing. I know as well that the local authority leader in that area has himself invested in additional officers. So we're working as a partnership to make sure that we're tackling it in the areas, and we follow the data. So that's important.
And one of the things constituents have found frustrating, you kind of alluded to in your first answer, was that their phone might get stolen, they go home, they go on their computer and go and find my iPhone, they know exactly where it is, tell the police, and yet nothing still happens, they don't get their phone back. So I'm definitely encouraged by the measures in the Police and Crime Bill about geolocation and not needing a warrant for that search. So do you also kind of welcome that, and do you think that will make a big difference moving forward?
Yes, definitely. I think, you know, we know that this is an organised industry at the volumes that we're seeing. So if we can, you know, it's an economy, isn't it? If you can stop supply onto other markets, both in having the tech-enabled facilities on the phone to do all we can. We want to push phone providers further to have like what's colloquially referred to as a kill switch on the phone, but also that we want to make sure that police officers, where they have the intel to disrupt offenders who are stealing at mass. We also know that that's not easy. We've seen evidence of offenders wrapping the phones in foil. So this is really complex work, but we will need to given what, I'm sure you've seen in your casework of really how disruptive and upsetting it is to have your personal phone theft from you. We need to make sure that we're doing all we can, and the bill recognises that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Garbett.
Morning, both. Thank you for your responses so far. Deputy Mayor, I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned earlier, which is really good to hear that the actual root causes of driving shoplifting are being looked at. Obviously, I've got a keen interest in drug use and problematic drug use. You mentioned Operation Yamata, which is focused on disrupting supply, which obviously from a trickle down doesn't really help someone with a problematic drug use like immediately. So I wondered, in the context of you saying that a public health approach is being taken, I wondered what is being done to look at more investment in drug treatment. I understand that some of the funding from ADDA has been lost to some of the charities that do amazing work, like Swim in Hackney, for example, have said that their ADDA funding is ended, but we know the programme's continuing. So I just wondered, in the context of how you're understanding what's driving shoplifting, I've heard from neighbourhood officers in the town centre that it very much is drug use. I just wondered how that's actually working in practice and if there's any more money going to drug treatment. Yeah,
you're right. It's ADDA, not Yamata, that I was. That's why I said Assure, because my dyslexic brain said A to my brain, but I didn't get ADDA. So yes, we do need to make sure that we continue to take a public health harm reduction approach. It's something that we look at through the London Drugs Forum. I can look at the specific funding case. If you want to email me over the details, we can follow that. But I think it's about that link up and that partnership that we want to make sure that we're
yeah, thank you, because I'm just concerned that so much money is going into, like in Dalston, where I'm a ward councillor, there's like coffee in security boxes and salmon with security tags on it. So we're obviously investing quite a lot of money in security measures, but we need to be investing in kind of what is actually driving shoplifting, which, yeah, like the neighbourhood police said really quickly when I asked them what was driving it, 4 of them quickly just said drug use. And I just think it's how we're investing in getting people into treatment to, so they get a better, so they're not stealing to fund their drug habit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we obviously regularly meet with OHID and the public health team in the GLA to look at various ways of, and the voluntary sector moreover that work in this area, to look at how we can improve drug treatment. Sorry, is that okay? Yeah. To look at how we can improve drug treatment. And as you say, I really believe we need to take a public health preventative approach alongside the enforcement. And we know as well, I hear from officers that often the enforcement interactions is a key moment of intervention to refer on to treatment.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We're now moving on to the next section of questioning, which is about the policing budget and spending review. The first question in this section is from Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Deputy Mayor, and good morning, Kenny. I think we're going to be talking about tough choices, as the Commissioner has said it throughout this section on the budget. He's been very clear that this is going to be difficult going forward, despite the injection of more money coming from the mayoral precept towards the policing budget. I'm actually going to start, I think, with Kenny, because obviously you've got your MPS oversight role, if that's okay. And given the toughness of the choices and the difficulty of meeting the budget, are there any new enhanced monitoring requirements that MOPAC is going to place on making sure that the Met is staying within its budget this year? Are we going to be looking at any kind of additional measures to make sure that things are staying on track? Because I think it's going to be really tough, isn't it?
Yes, and yes. So, yes, I'm just conscious of keeping my answer short today. Our CFO Amana is currently working up a new oversight framework for the financial side of the Met, because we do recognise, as the Met does, that they are in a very difficult financial situation, and we need to be monitoring both their resource and their capital spends even more thoroughly than has been the case in the past, not least in terms of how they meet their savings targets and how the tough choices as a whole are actually being implemented.
Yes, because one of the issues that we know a lot about is the whole the capital side, the estate strategy. We're looking at a number of police stations that are not in really very good condition. It's quite embarrassing to visit some of them and think that officers are working there, and at the same time we need to see improvements coming in so that the fleet of electric vehicles, there's no point having an electric vehicle if you don't charge it up. These are all, there's some big investment requirements, aren't there?
Yep, and you're absolutely right about their estate. They do need a capital investment in all of that. Obviously, that is something which has been put forward by the Met and ourselves as part of the spending review. There have been good conversations with Home Office officials who I do think understand the matter. We will need to see what comes out. But yeah, there are a number of Met buildings where, quite frankly, without investment, they probably wouldn't be safe within a few years for our Met colleagues to carry on working in. So I do think that really is quite an important matter to be addressed.
And so once Amanda has finished working up this financial framework, which is obviously is going to cover both revenue and capital from what you're saying, you will be sharing that new monitoring framework with both the Assembly's Budget and Performance Committee and with this committee from time to time. That might be one for the Deputy Mayor.
Short answer is yes, definitely. We want to make sure that Amana is working up this framework currently, and we want to make sure that in draft I've seen that it's definitely got a ability to move it into the transparent place. We'll probably come on to it later, but we're looking overall on how we refresh our data insight website, and transparency with London is public money. We want to make sure that we're showing how we have Met oversight, and I know Assembly Member Cooper that the estate strategy is something that we're all passionately lobbying to see. It's really important that the Met have a plan. We know that some of the stations are in a dire state, but we also need to know what they're doing in the short term, medium term and longer term to manage that within the budget that they have currently.
Yeah, it's quite embarrassing to visit some of the stations. They really are not in good condition, and I'm sure all of us individually around the table could mention a police station on our patch that definitely needs investment. But I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to stay with the sort of overview side of things at the moment. It's good to hear. I'm sorry, I misheard you. Amana, not Amanda.
Assembly Member Cooper, could you just one second?
Oh.
We've had, forgive me for interrupting, we've had a request from the broadcasting team, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to ask you to do exactly the opposite to what I usually ask. Apparently you're too close to the mic and it's causing feedback problems and not a good experience for people listening online. Would you mind moving it back ever so slightly? Thank you very much. Thank you. Apologies, Assembly Member Cooper.
No, not at all. I think hopefully I'm about the right distance from the microphone, and you can, possibly from the Conservatives who are having to listen to me, but and can hear me fully. But no, they're being very polite today and behaving themselves and not laughing. I wanted to come on to the issue of other parts of the overall GLA family budget, because one of the areas that are exploring it in Budget and Performance Committee, but also at the London Policing Board. The Commissioner reported on the 1st of May that the amount of money coming from TfL towards the British Transport Police has declined from what they'd originally estimated would be the amount coming in of 85 million, and it's gone down to 65 million. Now, that's quite a cut in the amount that was being anticipated, and I just wondered if you could give us some assurance that with the cut in TfL funding that's coming to the Met, how are MOPAC and the Met going to ensure that Londoners are safe when they're on public transport? Because obviously we have crime on the transport system.
Thank you. Just to clarify that it's revised down for 75 million in 25-26 and the possibility of moving to 65 million in 26-27. There are obviously ongoing negotiations to changes. The contract that we're talking about is the special services agreement, and this is the changes in the funding is a reflection on both parties wanting changes in that agreement. So the Met are transitioning their roads and transport police team into the neighbourhood policing models, as we've seen elsewhere. The Commissioner has a real drive around, drawing away from focus from the core policing offer, and he wants to make sure that that offer, especially around neighbourhood policing in line with New Met for London, is strengthened. And the Met have reviewed the current arrangement with TfL and identified a number of services that are believed to be outside of that scope, and these will be now procured and supplied by TfL. So to give you that assurance, Assembly Member Cooper, that those things that are currently done by the Metropolitan Police will not be lost. Especially, we know that one of the drivers is making sure that fares are adhered to, so that will be taken up and supplied by TfL. We obviously also have key conversations with British Transport Police around that as well, as TfL works across the Metropolitan Police and the British Transport Police. We also know that the position agreed is still subject to MOPAC revising its fees and charges rates. So things are still kind of but their proposal has been made to TfL, and so we're waiting for the Met to come back to us to present a final income position for TfL.
Okay, so you're saying that it's dropping from 85 million to 75 million rather than going from 85 down to 65, but it may still drop further, but it's still subject to further negotiation between different parties, MOPAC, the Met and TfL. It's not just about fare evasion, though. I mean, one of the big things on public transport that people come to me about, we were just talking about theft from shops, and in particular, mass phone theft from shops. And we know that there's a lot of theft of mobile phones, for example, when people are travelling on trains and buses and so on and so forth. So, that is just ordinary bog standard crime, isn't it? It's not an actual fare crime or related to being on transport. It's robbery in a public place, but it happens to be taking place on transport. And we know that, particularly amongst young people, and being trapped in a bus that you can't get off, you haven't got very far you can go to. So what are we doing to make sure that we are definitely going to be tackling this kind of thing?
So there's no change to the service that's provided there. That would be tackled in the normal way. Robbery on a bus is just the same as robbery in the street. If there's the ability for the Met to attend and tackle it, they absolutely will. If there's aggravating factors, that will contribute as well.
So exactly the same?
If it's on, obviously that's buses. If you're then talking about on trains and other things, that is a BTP issue. Obviously they work in close conjunction with the Met, and there will be intelligence sharing and decisions about who actions that stuff, but that's not part of the sort of shared service stuff that was paid for to be brought in.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, Deputy Mayor, on this, something which you've just said. In relation to the estate strategy, we are all passionately keen to see the estate strategy. We are all passionately keen to see it. Have you not seen it yet?
No. No, I haven't seen the latest iteration. I've been told that I'll receive a draft of it in the coming months.
Well, it's due to be published by the end of July.
Yes, so...
And you're the Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime, effectively the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for the London area, and you have yet to see the estate strategy yourself.
I continue to push almost weekly for it because I want to see it. I want to make sure that we're having conversations about the spending review now. I want to make sure that all of these things are aligned. I'm pushing very regularly. I was told spring, and it's an ongoing issue. So I'm very clear that I need to see it as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, quickly.
Very quickly, going back to the estate strategy, you're the Deputy Mayor for Policing. This has huge consequences, this particular document. We've been told it should be coming out the end of July, and you are actually telling us that you haven't even seen a copy of it yet.
Not in its current form, no. I'm as frustrated as I would say even more so. You're right. I am the Deputy Mayor for
Sorry, I
Policing
wouldn't
Crime.
be frustrated. I'd be damn well ensuring that I did see it. The consequences of that are huge, absolutely huge. Not just for financial reasons, but for political reasons for you. I mean, if I were you, I would demand that I saw this. I mean, we have all been waiting years for this to come out because it is such a huge thing. It's going to affect where people are stationed. It's going to affect the budget quite considerably. It's due to be published, which means it'll be going to the printers by the beginning of July. And you're telling us you haven't even seen it. If I were you, I'd go back as the Deputy Mayor for Policing and demand that you see it, because the consequences of it are going to be great.
I will continue to demand to see it.
Back to you, Chair.
I think the Deputy Mayor has been very clear about her commitment to seeing this document, and Deputy Mayor, I think you've heard what World Assembly members feel about this. Let's hope that this document, this long-awaited document, comes out as soon as it possibly can. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. Just to take it out to the spending review more broadly, I just wondered what representations MOPAC have made to the Home Office or Treasury to ensure that the safety priorities are reflected in the government spending review. I'm most interested in how we've taken a root causes and working with partners approach, so kind of amplifying calls from local authorities for investment in youth services and those kind of wider preventative measures. So, yeah, really interested in what representation MOPAC's made.
Yeah, so we put in the initial bid as part of the wider GLA bid in January. We continue to have regular conversations with the Home Office, pushing for the deal for the Metropolitan Police. We're clear both on the significance of London to the government's overall missions, and we're always strident in talking about the prevention measures that we need to see in that, especially around protection and investment around things like the violence reduction unit. So yes, we are definitely doing that.
Thank you. And what extent would you say that MOPAC has a real influence in the process, and what does that look like?
What it looks like is regular conversations about the bids that we're taking with both the Metropolitan Police and the Home Office to go through line by line the budget proposal we're putting forward and making sure that we're making that case alongside those numbers. So really we need things including the NIC, which we've discussed in the committee previously, to keep on going, why we need to see investment in technology in policing, why we need to see the continuation of funding for the violence reduction unit, our victim work, how it links into wider issues around the criminal justice system. So really what we're doing is breaking down the numbers in terms of workforce, in terms of technology, in terms of the infrastructure for the Met, also the other areas around partnership and prevention, and making that case clear to the Home Office, particularly in relation to the spending review coming forward.
That's really interesting. And do you feel like that? How do you feel like? What's your confidence in how that's being interrogated or responded to? And how are you feeling about how some of that might be, delivered in the spending review?
I mean, I'm an optimistic person overall, but I would say that we're having positive conversations. I think the level of focus from the Home Office in this area on policing is really welcome. I think the previous budget, getting a landmark amount of funding from the Home Office means that we have a level of confidence in those discussions. I think that they're the right conversations that we're having around, how can tech enable greater policing going forward or improve the quality of the offer for London. So yes, I would say that they're going positively, but obviously we can't be sure until the spending review in June, which will give us a proper indication.
That's really interesting. I've got an obviously keen interest in it, kind of how technology is used, but from a kind of evidence-based approach. So I really hope that that's being reflected in the discussions. And then just on the VRU, can you elaborate a bit on what's being asked for or how those partnership discussions are happening with, local authorities or the NHS? Because obviously we know that there's a lot of need around kind of mental health and, youth services, drug treatment. Like, how are we putting in a kind of amplifying partnership bid around those prevention measures?
We're making sure that the bid we're submitting is reflective of the police and crime plan, and that has prevention and partnership writ large across it. We're also, one of the reasons we did the initial bid in January alongside the GLA is because we wanted to have a comprehensive bid across those areas. But obviously the discussions that I'm particularly involved in are police central. But that also covers the work we're doing in partnership with the Violence Reduction Unit. You'll know that one of the government's missions, for example, is both halving knife crime and halving violence against women. We know those things are actually intrinsically linked, so prevention in both areas is key.
Yeah, and when we were looking at the budget earlier in the year, there was a real concern around some of the VRU, and just knowing how much great work they do, the more that we can get funding into that, the better. So, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Best.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back to the fact you kept using the language having conversations with government. Can you just be clear about what that means? Is that emails? Is that meetings? Are you going to the pub together? What does that mean? In what context are these conversations happening?
I want to be very clear. I'm not going to the pub with. No, it's definitely meetings and obviously follow-up, sharing of data and information.
Okay, so how many meetings have you had then? Are these down in Westminster or here? How many meetings have you had?
I mean, do you mean myself or do you mean across officials? Because obviously the CFOs, the Met and MOPAC meet with the Home Office, the Mayor's Office team are part of conversations with my teams.
I mean more the political conversations, right? The influence yourself and the Mayor are having. How often have you had those meetings?
I've had several meetings with the policing minister. Obviously, the Mayor of London has regular set meetings with the Home Office, with the Home Secretary. So these are ongoing conversations, but we obviously are, pushing previously the budget and now the spending review throughout.
And you think that it's understood the weight of kind of what we're experiencing here in London and the financial constraints? Do you get the vibe that that is understood and we're heading to a positive outcome?
I definitely know that we are putting forward a very strong case of the weight of the need, and the questions we're getting back are interrogating those appropriately.
Okay.
I mean, so if it's helpful, I used to run the police spending review when I was in the Home Office, and all I'll say is the level of interest that's coming back from Home Office officials this year is quite heavy, and that generally comes down if there's interest from the people at the very top, i.e. the ministers. So obviously that doesn't guarantee good outcome because stuff goes into the Treasury, but it's a good indication of how seriously something's been taken by the powers that be within those departments.
Thanks. And Deputy Mayor, what additional money is needed from government? Do you agree with the Commissioner's assessment?
Yes, we obviously have worked on the initial bid together, so the request for 1.52 billion in cash terms by 28-29 would see the Met grow in its workforce to 49,614, of which 33,432 would be police officers. So those is the numbers that that we're working towards. The additional funding would assist the Met in meeting its long-term ambition to grow its total strength to 38,000 officers and 19,000 staff.
Sorry, can I just confirm the figure you gave?
Sorry, which figure?
The first figure, the
funding
by 28.
figure. So this is we're asking for an additional £1.52 billion in cash terms by 28-29.
Additional, but okay. The figure we're working off is the proposed annual investment of 1.79 billion. Is that?
I've got 1.52. Where can you clarify where you got that from?
That's from the Commissioner's report from the London Policing Board on the 1st of May 2025.
Okay, I can come back as to if there's a discrepancy on that.
I think possibly just to clarify where we are, that would be helpful. Thank you. We've gone into a little bit, but does the funding included in this look to address the Met's estate?
It's both capital and revenue, so yes.
And just to come back to the conversation we were having, I am confused as to why the estate strategy isn't being shared with you, because in a political sense, you are going out to bat right now to get those funds. So I don't understand who would be holding back from sharing that draft as up to date as possible with you, because, you know, you're going to be having these informal conversations with government about what the estate strategy looks like and what we need. I mean, and it's genuinely, I'm not trying to attack you. I know you said you're frustrated, but I don't know why you're not there, your advisors aren't just sitting down and saying, show me the bloody document, I need it, otherwise it's going to make it difficult for me to fight your corner. And I genuinely don't understand what the reluctance would be to share that with you. Clearly you're not going to leak it.
No, I'm not.
No, I know. I'm completely like...
No, I mean, I want to be clear that, you know, obviously as part of my role, I take regular decisions in relation to estates, and in every decision I have to take in that space, I say this is exactly why I need to see the estate strategy. I know that my team continually push. I'm meeting the Commissioner tomorrow for our regular one-to-one. I will continue to push. I fervently agree with you.
So I'm trying to bat on the same side of you, saying I agree. I don't know what the reason is, and I think if we could know as a committee what the reason is for not even sharing this with the Deputy Mayor, I would like to know that, because I'd like to support you in at least seeing that strategy, because you need to go out and bat for us to get the money to fund it. So I'd like, if we could find out even the reason that it's not being shared with you, that would be helpful.
I mean, I obviously, I would say two things. That the spending review bid, we definitely talk in capital terms. That numbers are in there, but Moreover, I have regular meetings with the senior officer in relation to estates to have those conversations. But the overall strategy is the overall strategy, and that's what I need to see.
Okay. And just a final question around what you're doing to plan for if the money doesn't come in.
So obviously we have ongoing budgeting and monitoring conversations with the police. As alluded to earlier, we're strengthening our financial oversight of that, and we need to budget appropriately and make sure that the savings that have previously been put forward in the budget are realised, and we need to obviously the spending review bid is ambitious, and we need to make sure that if we don't get the full amount, that we're acting appropriately in line with the budget and having the fail-safes to make sure that we can be adaptable in that.
Just to be clear, you're saying there that the bid is ambitious. Is the bid not what the Met needs?
No, the bid definitely is. It's the ambition to have those numbers of officers by 2028 is what I was reflective of. So I'm just saying we need to make sure that if it's for any reason less than that, that we have the structure to make sure that we're holding and supporting the Met in working through those numbers. But that's why it's really important that our teams are working together in devising the bid, but also making sure that the current financial savings are progressing.
And would you agree with the Commissioner's assessment that if the government don't give you that money that you've requested, that is going to make London less safe with continued rises in knife crime, violence against women and girls and theft?
I mean, we definitely are talking to the Home Office about the importance of having this uplift in making sure that...
No, sorry, the question was, do you agree with the Commissioner's assessment that if we don't get this additional funding, that there will be a continued rise in knife crime, violence against women and girls and theft?
Actually, I mean, Kenny can give you the latest statistics, but I believe that quite a number of those areas are seeing sustained reductions, so that's important. But regardless of that, I do think that we need to make sure that we have a budget fit for London and London safety, yes.
So you do agree with the Commissioner?
I agree that we need to make sure that we have a workforce in line with the spending review bid, and we are doing all we can to keep Londoners safe. I don't think that it's, I don't want to say that if we don't get the full amount that it's a prerequisite that crime will go up, because I don't think that that's acceptable for London. I think we need to all make sure that we're continuing to do all the work we can through the Policing Crime Plan. The Policing Crime Plan was constructed alongside the Metropolitan Police. So we're making sure that the ambitions we have are costed and are planned for.
Okay. It sounds like you're not willing to agree with the Commissioner on that. You also, I think, used a bit of a Freudian slip saying the bid was ambitious. It does seem to me that you're preparing to accept less money than you've asked for from the government.
What I would say overall, Assembly Member Best, is I think that we need to do all we can, and we are actively doing that to make sure that we're making the very best case for London in the spending review. I am fully committed to that work. I know that the Metropolitan is fully committed to that work. I was talking about the ambition alongside of the number of officers. That was just a reflection of the ambition for the numbers of workforce officers by 28, 29. I say I'm definitely someone who wants to work as hard as they can for the very best scenario, but I will make sure that we continue to have a police force and a police crime plan, that we can't just say, you know, because we don't get, if we don't get, it's an unknown, isn't it? We're talking about hypotheses about how much money we get in the spending review, that we can just, you know, give up. We need to do all we can to get it, but also that work won't stop when we do.
I mean, that's what the Mayor's been saying in relation to money for the past 10 years, so I welcome the change in attitude.
Assembly Member Duval.
Look, we're never always going to get all the money that we want, but you do, in terms of your submission, I mean, listening to the previous speaker, you'd think that the last previous government was giving loads of money to the Metropolitan Police Service and funding it fully in terms of all its aspirations and needs. I didn't quite hear from the other side during that argument of spending some of this or asking for this money. So in terms of what's been given to you to date, in terms of that, that's probably the highest contribution made by any government in recent years, probably for a long while in recent years, but also in terms of the Mayor's commitment of always trying to fund the Metropolitan Police Service. I think from the day one of this, from the Mayor taking office, has given extra money, unlike the previous Mayor who became Prime Minister, who actually decided that we weren't going to have extra money and give money back to government and cut the policing precept, I think, because of his tax regime issues. So in terms of where we're going, in terms of outlining the strategy around getting extra money or getting fair shares for Londoners, right? Can you just remind us that actually you and Sadiq, working with the Police Commissioner, are constantly raising the issues around the fairness of the policing settlement in terms of making sure that the government is aware there is a problem with our the way that money is allocated to London in terms of tackling crime?
Absolutely. I mean, you're quite right, Assembly Member Duval, that the final budget for 25-26 included a record £1.6 billion of investment in policing from City Hall, which has helped to save 935 neighbourhood police officers, which was previously set to be lost. It's really important that it's also recognised that in the previous underfunding of the police, that the Mayor stepped up and funded a quarter of the policing budget. So that's really important. And as you say, Assembly Member Duval, it's about making sure that we're having a case for London and understanding as a capital city that we have additional pressures that elsewhere in the country doesn't have. And part of that is the National International Capital Cities Grant, or the NIC, which we got reinstated in the last budget, but we need to make sure we continue. And the Home Office's independent review recognised that the range of costs were not fully met by the funding formula and identified a 240 million annual gap in its funding at 2015 prices. Taking into account inflation and the extra £63.3 million announced by the Home Office in 25-26, and adding the annual average costs of policing protests, there remains a gap of £180 million per year. So this is the kind of case that we're trying to put forward currently to the Home Office, because, as you rightly recognise, as a capital city, we have different pressures.
Okay, and part of making that case, other parties are coming to the table. So we've heard what the Commissioner is doing, we've heard what the Mayor and what yourself is doing. Where's London Council's in this? Is there a publicly available document produced by London Councils arguing for policing in our communities and the funding for it to persuade government of our case? Is there anything that's been produced in recent years?
I can make sure I can ask Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I can make sure that I go back to our CFO and ask what's come through the LHOPs at London Council to provide evidence in that space. We obviously work closely with them, and as previously outlined by Assembly Member Small Edwards, we know that, especially in certain areas, that evidence is important.
The reason why I asked that question is that it's important that you're all asking for those extra resources, or the fair shares of resources that London needs, but also others need to come to play. And I don't see much of that, of asking others, in terms of either endorsing your requests or even in terms of what the police commissioner is doing. I don't think that's, we're never fully going to get it unless we get it, and I think there are there's overwhelming support for fair resources going into policing across London, and we need to make sure everyone's playing their part in that.
I can definitely, I agree, and I think that obviously I know that local authorities and all other statutory services, because of previous underfunding, are feeling financial strain too, but I want to also recognise that members of Parliament have really been extremely supportive in the conversations and the need for funding London appropriately.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Deputy Mayor, why would the policing minister give London, as our colleague Assembly Member DeVal's called it, fair funding if you don't agree with the Commissioner's calling? If the Commissioner is saying we need that money to prevent crime and you won't back his comment, why would the policing minister give us more money? Because he thinks it's going to be all right, because you do.
You mean she? Sorry, the policing minister, Diana Johnson.
Sorry, I'm used to facing the policing minister and Lords, who's a he, excuse me. That's the minister I'm used to. But any policing minister, why would they give money if they believe that that you think it's going to be fine and you don't agree with the Commissioner?
I don't recognise my characterisation of it's going to be fine. I'm saying that it's important that we put forward a bid that really makes the case for London and the additional pressures for London, that what we see on the streets will make sure we have the right, in this committee today we've talked fervently about making sure that neighbourhood policing is prioritised, making sure that we have confidence in community policing, and making sure we have the workforce that goes alongside that. I am actively talking to government and making that case. All I meant was that, if we don't get the full amount because, of the pressures that the government are in, moreover, because of the huge funding gap that they're trying to manage, I think that needs to be recognised, that we need to we need to make sure that we have an ongoing adaptability in what we can do, because it's not good enough for any of us to say that that if we don't reach that crime can continue unabated. We can't. We are talking about the safety of Londoners, and we all need to work progressively and together to make sure that continues to be tackled.
So my colleague said that you're preparing to accept less money than you have in the bid. That's what your answer sounds like. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying that I'm going to work continually to lobby with everything that I have to make sure that we have the resources that we have worked through and said that we definitely need to improve things for the Metropolitan Police after years of underfunding. I will hand on heart say that is our definite priority, to make sure that we're doing that. All I'm saying is I recognise the wider finances of the nation, and the government spending has been openly talked about, and the gap that they're trying to manage across all public sectors is there. So I'm not going to ignore that
sorry,
and make sure that whatever happens, I am prioritising the safety of London.
But you're not doing it at the level or the same vigour that the Commissioner's doing. The Commissioner's been very clear. He said why he needs the money, and if he doesn't get the money, London's at risk. You're not saying the same thing. You are not backing the call that the Commissioner's making, so I believe that weakens our case entirely, because if you look at the numbers, one of the things that is different now, if the policing minister could talk about underperformance, because yes, the previous mayor had less money, but he also had less crime. So if the commissioner is to be believed, or you're to be believed, I think will have a direct effect on how much money the government stump up. Because if it's going to be okay and you can adapt, then the government shouldn't give you any more money, should they?
I don't think that any of us are saying it's okay at all. I want to be very clear on that. I'm saying that we are actively working with the Metropolitan Police in fully supporting the bid that was being submitted by ourselves and the police, and making sure that we're making the case for this is what we need for Londoners. We all talked about the underfunding that's happened previously, the amount of officers that are needed, New Met for London, building back the foundation. These are things that we've been talking about for a long time now. We all know where the Metropolitan Police are, and we need to have an ambitious plan to make sure that we're getting what Londoners rightly deserve, and I'm fervent in my work to do that. I'm just saying that I don't want us to... I'm saying that I will do that, but I don't want us to not recognise if that isn't fully able because of the government's finances, that we can therefore not do that. But I do recognise, obviously, more resources in the right areas and an ability to have a modern police force will have a positive impact on crime.
It could be interpreted, I am interpreting it, that you are not backing the commissioner in his call and to be clear, your job is not to worry about the government's finances. Your job is to raise as much money as you can for London. It's the police minister's job to worry about their finances. Back to you, Chair.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey, I think the Deputy Mayor has been very clear in her response to the question you've asked on a number of occasions now.
Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member Lord Bailey. Moving on to Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Can you confirm, has a formal submission gone in for this spending review for the Metropolitan Police?
The submission for the whole GLA was made in January, including the Metropolitan Police.
Okay. Is that published anywhere? No. Can we have it published?
I think it's obviously it's an internal document in line with the spending. It's not my document. It's the Mayor's overall GLA submission.
I'm sure we'd all like to see what specific requests have been made.
The specific request, as previously mentioned, was for £1.52 billion.
So it's just that. It's not a list of requests within that. Some sort of acknowledgement as to why that amount of money is needed. If that's been written down somewhere, I would request that we have a copy of it so we can see what the Mayor is actually asking for.
So I've got the numbers in terms of the workforce request here.
Would you like to put it all in writing because of time? We would like to see from you what the Mayor has specifically requested. Just a couple of points. If I can just point out that whilst more money is coming into the Met, over £60 million is going to be needed to cover the national insurance hike, or the employment tax as we call it. And the other thing, while I'm here, that I'm concerned about is recruitment. We all know recruitment to the Met is a real problem at the moment. And if you look at terms and conditions, unless they're improved, I don't suspect that will get any better. Now, within the papers, within the finance papers, the allowance for their increase in salary, I think it's 2.5%. I don't think that will sort out the recruitment problem. If it doesn't, this is going to throw these figures out even more, isn't it? Are you concerned about that?
And that's part of the sort of spending review thing, which is that any funding would have to, above those levels, would definitely need to be funded, and certainly part of the submissions which will be made to the police.
Okay, so that is within the money that's being asked for. Specifically, how much money are you asking for on that specific item?
We're asking for any pay increases above that to be covered.
Well, yes, because 60 million will cover what the increase is at the moment. But if we're actually asking for an increase in police pay, which I think we're going to have to, in order to recruit to London, because the recruitment is a disaster, the increase in national insurance contributions because of the jobs tax that this government has very wrongly put in is going to hike that up even more. So there'll be an even bigger spending gap. Do you understand what I'm saying, Deputy Mayor?
I do. I mean, in the last budget, that was allowed for, and that's why we're asking again for that allowance to be recognised, as Kenny has said. I want to also clarify, we can get you the latest numbers, but I think the recruitment of the Metropolitan Police has improved. So I think that that's important as we talk about improving the workforce numbers, and it's definitely something that we're alive to. We need to make sure that we're making sure that the offer of being in the police force and recognising the important role that it is, and making sure that we continue to recruit more officers into the police.
Well, I hear what you say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We're going to now take a short 5-minute break. So could everybody be back here by 11:45, please? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for coming back on time. We are now moving on to Assembly Member Garbett.
Is it me, or is it? Have you done your? Oh, I thought it was Emma.
No.
Which question are we on?
Sorry, we're on question 13. I thought that was Assembly.
I think we're
Member.
12, aren't we? Have we done 12?
My apologies. My apologies. So, Assembly Member Garbutt, I think you wanted to come in as a supplementary after question 12. Is that correct? If not, we can move on to Assembly Member Hall.
Yeah, but I don't know if Emma's asked the original one.
I think we were on the people supplementaries after question 11. And then we'd finished those and we were on to question 12.
Right, OK. Well, according to my notes that I read out previously, we are now on question... we're now on question 13. And that's Assembly Member Garbutt.
No, it's not.
What have we got?
Sorry, so we had... so I was going to ask a question around the mitigations to protect frontline services. And then I believe Assembly Member Hall and Assembly Member... And then, sorry, I think you wanted a supplementary, and then I think Assembly Member Hall and Roberts were going to do the question after. Right,
well, we've got those in order, but so Assembly Member Best, you want to ask there's a question here for you to ask, is that correct? Do you want to go ahead and ask it?
OK, cool. Thank you. Thanks. Just wanted to ask, as you just heard, around the mitigations being considered to protect frontline services and reform progress. And the progress on reform, sorry.
In the budget submitted for this financial year, we were very clear in protecting frontline policing, public protection, and the ongoing work around reform. Additionally, with the 32 million grant, the Mayor was clear that he wanted to see high volume crime partnership prevention realised in that, as well as obviously the work to reduce, where possible, the impact of the tough choices.
Do you think that enough work has been done to mitigate those tough choices? I mean, we saw, and we'll get into it further, a lot of options on the table as to the services that were possibly at risk of cuts. Have we seen any further progress in protecting those reforms that are going to protect those services?
Yes, there was 935 officer spaces that were we previously thought in the original tough choices would have to be lost, so the additional money has covered that. I know this is likely to be a topic of questioning in a second, but we've obviously had to move forward with the decision around Royal Parks policing. However, the mitigations that the Metropolitan Police have worked through on that recognises, especially in central London, the need for additionality, so additional officers have been provided for those central parks covered, and so that is an illustration of how the additional money has been working through in terms of mitigation, but the work that we're seeing on the other tough choices is actively being worked through at the moment.
So if we go back to the frontline services, obviously we saw quite a stark number of reduction to officers. What does that number look like now?
I mean, the full allocation hasn't been done yet, so I can't give you that. But I know already, as previously mentioned, that 935 officers, moreover, have been protected with the additional money. the original money and the money that we have got through the Home Office gives conditionality around protecting neighbourhood policing and community officers. So we're making sure we're doing that. Additionally, I know this is something that Assembly Member Duval pointed out at the very beginning of our conversations around this, was moving, reshaping the Metropolitan Police to make sure that frontline officers were taken back to community policing, and so those roles that can be done by police staff could be doing that, can do that, and that's something that the Metropolitan Police are working through now as the budget has been allocated.
To be clear, we're still looking at losing over 1,000 officers.
Yes, yeah. I don't think, I mean, I know that this is something that has been conversation throughout this budget. I think we all know that the Commissioner has expressed how, because of the underfunding previously, there's no more, for lack of a better, there's no more small choices to be taken. In the way that the Metropolitan Police budget is structured, is you get to officers, it's a heavily revenue-based budget. So the tough choices were rightly characterised in that it does mean an officer reduction. That's something that we've sadly been very conscious of the whole way through.
Because obviously when you're talking about the allocations to the Met, we're talking about yearly rise on rise on rise on rise of allocation to the Met's budget, but not keeping pace with the funding the Met needs to operate. That, and that, just to be clear, that's the environment we're talking about, isn't it?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to be clear on what we're talking about, and then the.
Sorry, just to clarify, you mean that the allocation hasn't met with demand?
Yes.
Yeah.
So because you're talking about the historic with the Met, and so I just want to be clear that there has been rises every year to the Met's budget.
But it hasn't met the demand.
It hasn't, and again with this government, the gap hasn't been met. So we're talking about a similar scenario year on year, where the Met budget rises, but the Commissioner, and I'd hope as well yourself, as this being your main concern, right? I think Assembly Member Bailey put it right earlier. Your concern isn't the financial position of the government, but the Deputy Mayor and the Commissioner believing that the budget isn't rising with demand. And that's the same picture that we're carrying forward this year.
Yes, that's why we're actively lobbying for a budget that reflects the workforce and police force and demand that we need in London.
I think the Commissioner's been very clear on that. And the only final question I had was just to come back to, you said earlier that the NIC grant had been reinstated. I just want to be clear that the NIC grant wasn't taken away, but it's been increased.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks.
And my apologies, Assembly Member Best, for the confusion earlier. My scribblings get very scribbly in the margin sometimes. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. Just a question about some of the kind of deep systemic issues around racism within the Metropolitan Police and how this plays out for police officers. And I wanted to know, in terms of kind of costs around litigation and kind of settlements, and just how you're speaking to the Met about those kind of processes and the costs to the Met instead of kind of dealing with the systemic issues.
Obviously, moreover, we look at the police's work to meet their ambitions in New Met for London around cultural reform. This takes a broad strategic look at training, recruitment, management, development, and as we are going on to discuss vetting complaints, we monitor that in its completeness, and disproportionality is something that we look at throughout those lenses. I think, as discussed in a recent London Policing Board meeting, the police has done a huge amount of work to reinstate that leadership training, that new Met for London training. This was recognised through them coming out of Engage, that a lot of the things that needed to be put back in terms of its foundation are being put through, and it's about us continuing to push for those high standards and positive and inclusive culture. Something that we've been actively looking at recently is the London Race Action Plan. I believe that that's the work that the Metropolitan Police actively want to do for all Londoners, but especially internally as well. I think, you need to make sure that you have a safe psychological space for all officers, as well as being able to serve all Londoners.
Thank you. And I know, we will come on to some of those specifics later, but I was just quite interested in how much money is put aside or is used for kind of compensation litigation within the Met with regards to frontline officers.
So we'd need to come back to you on that. It's not just officers. I think when you look at most of the cases which go to Employment Tribunal, they're actually around disability. Well, it certainly was the last time I checked, but I would need to double check with that.
About what? Sorry, I missed.
Disability.
Okay.
Sorry, it's my Scottish accent on the microphone. But yeah, that seems to be that was the main issue that was coming through the Employment Tribunal. That is pretty consistent with other large organisations, to be fair. I believe that's not a Met-specific issue in that regard. And the Met are obviously spending a lot in terms of the investment into their CDI directorate and on their internal culture plan, London Race Action Plan, and their ambition to become an anti-discriminatory organisation, trying to look at that sort of prevention side of how they go about it. So I think that, and I do know that they try and take the learning from the ET cases and feed that back into what they do. So I think the Met are doing the right thing in this space, if I'm honest. But these things take a long time to work their way through, and nobody's ever going to get it 100% right all of the time.
Thank you. Yeah, it'd be really good to see kind of the costs, some of the costs around that, and the disproportionality. And we'll come on to some of the other points later. And just while I've got the microphone, just to ask an additional question from earlier, Deputy Mayor, when you mentioned how much funding was being requested, can you state how much is being asked for the VRU in the requests?
No, but I can get that specific number if you.
That would be great. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Is MOPAC a racist organisation? I tell you why I asked the question, and you're hesitant. I think we are constantly referring to the Met as a racist organisation. People seem to be leaning into it. I include you on that list very readily. And I wonder, do you do any better in the metrics that we use to decide the Met is racist than they do? And what about the London Fire Brigade? What about the Home Office? My point being, if we're going to continue to call the Met racist, right, shouldn't it be your job to be even-handed about that and point to any progress they have made? And what I would like to see is the metrics that, for you, identified the Met as racist, and then I'd like to see a comparison of your own organisation when measured by those metrics.
I want to be clear that it is my values to make sure that all organisations do the work to be inclusive organisations, obviously across the protected characteristics for all. I mean, we're just discussing disability, so it's important that we do that. I think the Casey review was stark in its assessment of the Metropolitan Police at that time. This committee accepted those recommendations and accepted the work that needs to be done to make sure that we're holding the Metropolitan Police accountable for that, and that's why we continue to look at that cultural reform. I think that obviously, I mean, Kenny's just spoken about other statutory organisations that need to do the work in these spaces too. I think we all need to challenge ourselves to hold ourselves up to the value of being inclusive organisations.
But that's my point. We are very readily holding the Met up, but are we holding you up? Are we holding the GLA
Assembly
up?
Member Bailey, we are actually talking about funding and the policing plan, so I think we're moving off the subject a little bit.
Chair,
I think there will, at some point in the future, be an opportunity for this committee to look at Casey and where we've come in terms of the recommendations. But we are talking
Chair,
about
my
spending.
defence, I never mentioned Casey. The Deputy Mayor did, not incorrectly, I might add. It's an irrelevant point. But I responded to something that was said in this room. I'm just asking, if we're going to keep insisting the Met is racist and there's a set of metrics to that, you should challenge MOPAC, because how can MOPAC continue to call the Met racist if it doesn't do any better itself?
Assembly Member Bailey, this is not to do with spending. I'm going to move on to Assembly Member Hall. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I asked you this question a couple of months ago and I don't think you fully understand what I meant, so I'm going to ask you again. What assessment of the likely impact of the first tranche of tough choices has been made by the Metropolitan Police?
The Metropolitan Police have, from the beginning, that's why they wanted to outline the tough choices early on, so that they can work up the implementation and delivery plans around those things. They continue to do that. Obviously, when that was started, that work didn't have the funding allocated to it. It now does, and they are working through the plans of that allocation with the mayors and mine oversight and prioritisation of spend.
So the impacts, as an example, the cut to forensics, I mean, my colleagues are going to talk to you about the Royal Parks, the Mounted Branch, etc. So those cuts are going in, I believe. They are doing it. But are you telling me the assessments of the impacts those cuts are going to have not been fully worked through?
No, they are actively those impacts are actively being worked through in the plans to move them from budget lines to actuality. So every tough choice now that the budget is allocated is being worked through in terms of implementation and impact assessment, and decisions are being taken in line with those impacts.
But impact assessments are normally done before you make a cut to see what a disaster it's going to be. That's how it works everywhere else. What you're saying to me is that they've decided to cut these things, whatever, and then they'll work out what effect it's going to have. That's the wrong way round, isn't it?
Obviously, that is an operational decision.
No,
but
I'm
what I
asking
would
you, it's
say
the wrong
is,
way round, Deputy Mayor, isn't it?
If I could answer, what I would say is they had to make decisions based on the funding presumptions that they had at the time, because they didn't have the money from the government and us allocated at that time. And now that they have that, they are working through those impacts and making sure that they have the additional allocation of funding to flex and soften if they have to because of the impacts.
Okay, so let me ask you again. Do you not think that an impact assessment on a decision, when it is so drastic as some of these, should be made before the decision is made? Because it could be that there'd be less of an impact if something else was cut. Do you not think a proper impact assessment should be done on these very, very big decisions before they're made?
I think that the Commissioner rightly looked at the areas of funding and the protection of things like neighbourhood policing, public protection, and the reform agenda were rightly decided as the right areas for protection because of the impact that you're discussing. So the expertise that him and his team have in this area looked at in the overall budget plan and allocated the tough choices obviously across the whole Metropolitan police force, and therefore you know, to reach the numbers that at that stage they thought they would may have to reach. And now that the funding has been fully allocated, they're working through how those additional impacts. I don't think you heard directly from the Commissioner. I don't think obviously any of those decisions were taken lightly. They're tough choices for a reason. We know that they were going to be impactful, but as you understand from being in a local authority, when you have to make savings, there's no way that you can do that without impact.
Well, on running a business, any of us that do that have to work out, if you're going to make a decision, what impact is that going to have? So impact assessments are very, very important. And when you're looking at taking money away from forensics, Royal Parks, mounted branches, places like that, they are going to have a massive impact. So you're basically telling me that the Commissioner and his colleagues looked at it and from experience thought, we'll just do that without any impact assessment being done first. That's what you've actually just said to us.
No, I'm saying that the budget, the outline budget at that stage, that they knew that they were going to need to make significant savings. They looked across the Metropolitan Police Service and outlined areas where the impact against the prioritised areas they wanted to protect were outlined, and now that the full budget is in place, they're working through the allocation of that. I want to be clear that I don't think either ourselves or the Commissioner think any of those choices wouldn't have impact, and never thought at any stage they wouldn't, but they are looking to make sure that the mitigations of those decisions are now fully understood now that they have the allocated funding.
So you don't think proper impact assessments should be made before funding issues are decided on, which they have been to all of us, it looks like decisions have been made before impact assessments have been carried out, because we've got that from what you've told us, from both this meeting and from a meeting a couple of months ago. So is that correct?
Can I come in?
No, well, I'd like a response from the Deputy Mayor, just to make sure that I'm repeating what she's telling me.
I mean, I know that this committee saw the tough choices. I know that the Commissioner came and spoke.
Nobody's doubting that. I'm just talking to you about impact assessments. I asked you a couple of months ago whether impact assessments have been done, and you said no decisions had been made and no impact assessments had been done. The decisions have been made before impact assessments have been done. And those of us that work in local authorities or have run small businesses know full well that we're obliged to do impact assessments.
So I think this has been done in stages by the Met. When you look at something, a business as large and complex as the Met, they're not going to be able to do full, detailed econometric sort of impact assessments for every single area that they might cut or they might have to make savings in. So what they did was to take that, look at what would be the high-level choices which are available to them, and look at what would be the high-level impact of that. For example, if they were to take money out of Met CC, you would get longer call handling, longer to dispatch, and actually potentially threats to life or Article 1 rights as a result. After that, they've progressed that into kind of how do we then rank them in terms of what is the least bad options of that?
I think we understand this, Kenny, and going back to the Deputy Mayor, if I can. The thing is, these decisions are extreme. They really are extreme. I mean, I looked at them and I thought, that's the Commissioner saying, if you don't give me more money, we'll do something extreme, hoping that that would get more money in. And we all know more money is needed into the Met. You've got, I would imagine, everybody's full support on that. There's no question about that. My issue is that impact assessments have not been done properly before these decisions have been made. And I think by what you've said or not said, that would go along with that.
The decisions are being worked through currently, so that's because in the work to allocate the funding given to them, the impact is now being assessed and those decisions are being taken.
So how much has MOPAT been involved in the discussion regarding these tough choices?
We've been involved in the discussions throughout.
Throughout? So you knew right from the beginning that they could be cuts to forensics, Royal Parks, mounted branch, etc. You knew all of that. And when would we go back to that time? When were you aware that these cuts might be made?
I think the discussions of the tough choices started in around around, well, after I started, wasn't it? So October, November?
So October, November, that's quite some time ago, which would have given you and MOPAC quite enough time to do proper impact assessments, wouldn't it?
As I've previously said, we were waiting for the funding allocations to come through so that we could have a clear picture of what the funding allocations would be in line with the tough choices, so that the work now that is being done to bring them into deliverable plans has an impact lens on it.
You clearly knew there were going to be difficult choices all those months back, months and months and months back. Surely proper impact assessments should have been made at that point, so you could make proper decisions, so that you could be shown the decisions that are being made. You are Deputy Mayor for policing. These impacts are going to have a massive effect in certain areas, massive. And really, the impact of those should have been assessed. I'll leave it there, Chair, because I know time's marching on.
Deputy Mayor, did you want to come? So I saw you.
Yeah,
your light
I mean,
on.
I want to be clear that through the tough choices, that on every tough choice that was taken, one of the reasons that the Commissioner wanted to outline those early on was so that he could work up internal working groups to look at how those would be moved forward and the impacts understood of those, alongside the process of working up understanding the allocations we were getting from funding from the Mayor's Office and the Home Office. Now that that has been done, we are now moving into a stage of implementation of those tough choices in line with the budget allocated to them.
Yeah, but you said there weren't proper impact assessments finished and done. You've said it's not. They're working on it now. The decisions have been made. My very point is the fact that these decisions were made before impact assessments were carried out properly. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Deputy Mayor, is that correct?
No, because they outlined a budget. The budget didn't have funding allocated to it. They outlined the budget so they could have a working understanding based on the assumptions at that stage, and start to have, we're talking about thousands and thousands of roles here. They can't take those decisions obviously lightly, and they worked those working groups up in line to do those. Those things have shifted. We know originally the tough choices list was much longer. Those shifted through after the initial spending review and continue to be worked through with the impact of those services fully in mind as the allocations are made.
So has MOPAC helped with these decisions and with the impact assessments?
We've been in continual discussion throughout.
And yet we still haven't got proper assessments in place.
Okay,
I'll pass back to you, Chair.
I think, from my understanding of what the Deputy, and it's a very important point, but I think the Deputy Mayor has said that it's an ongoing process. Is that correct? So that's my understanding
Chair,
of it.
We've heard what the Deputy Mayor said, and it's on record. Thank you.
Thank you, and she's just clarified that as well. Thank you, Assembly Member Hall. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. If I may start with an apology. At the beginning of the meeting, I failed to declare an interest as a trustee of the Royal Parks, and I'd like to rectify that error with immediate effect.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to continue along this line of the impact assessments, and I think it might be considered reasonable that with such an enormous amount of cuts and officers and various departments that maybe it's not been possible to do them all. But which ones have been done and which ones have you seen?
Well, obviously, we're going to talk on the Royal Police allocations. That's something that both through from the original stance, we've obviously seen a lot of evidence submitted by Royal Parks Trust and others around impacts around that, and that's been fully thought through in the decisions taken. I think we'll go on to discuss it, I believe, but it's a good illustration of how that has been thought through. We know that throughout the kind of thrust of the decision was to embed it in neighbourhood policing, and therefore through a meeting where they look at the tough choices allocations, there's been long discussions about what the mitigations could be in relation to those things, and worked through into a proposal and giving enough lead in time for that change to happen so that it can be continually thought through and adapted with all partners at the table.
Thank you. Any other ones that you've seen?
I mean, I'd have to have the list of where they are.
It must. I mean, we have forensics, we've got dog units, we've got mounted units, we've got firearms, we've got flying squad, we've got children's safety officers, children in schools officers. So you must have seen.
Yeah, so I've definitely seen the children in schools office. So that was slightly different. It wasn't primarily driven by a tough choice. That was more of an operational decision. I'm looking, for example, at front councils this week. I know that there's discussions going on about the fire squad. It's a regular, ongoing conversation.
Okay, so we've got all of these cuts which are out in the public domain. Some of them have had impact assessments done, not all of them. However, if I'm correct, you are endorsing the full suite of cuts which the Commissioner is recommending, even without impact assessments?
I mean, the budget
the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for the London area, so you either endorse them or you don't.
I definitely endorse the budget that we put through, the Mayor's budget on peace and crime.
No, I was talking about the cuts without first having sight of impact assessments. Oh, no, it's gone again. There we are.
I don't know why. We still have the £32 million that are less that we're working through the allocation of, which is why I can't say, you know, that the full impact is fully understood, because we're using that money to look at the mitigations needed in those choices.
Okay. Maybe the fingers away from the buttons might help with the with the microphone. So theoretically, then, if we're still looking through all of the impact, if there's still 32 million to be allocated, we could, before the 1st of November, reverse the decision to cut entirely the Royal Parks OCU. If that's the train of thought that you were just going down.
Mike, is there a problem with it, Deputy Mayor? Okay, we're just sorting that now.
Time.
Thank you, Lauren.
I don't want to. The police have moved forward with the decision on the Royal Parks Police. They are obviously looking to implement that in November. They are in active conversations with all of the parties about the work they want to do to make sure that they can do that as safely as possible. They obviously have expertise in policing other parks that are not under the Royal Parks Police, so they're looking at that. They've looked at an uplift in neighbourhood officers in the central zone, recognising the additional footfall of those parks. So they are working that through, but the decision has been taken.
Okay. I wanted to come on to those additional officers for the central parks. I understand it's 14 new additional officers for BCUs adjacent to the central parks, with 3 coordinating roles, I believe. Okay, so that's new resource.
It's additionally allocated resource,
which is to be welcomed. What about Greenwich? What about Richmond? What about Bushey? When will they get their additional allocation of officers?
At the moment, they're being those parks are being worked through in the assumption of being taken over by the neighbourhood teams in that area.
Yeah, but when will we be seeing additional resource to the same magnitude that we've seen for the central parks?
We're in a
is Greater London not as important as Central London?
The decision has been taken in relation to the savings that have had to be actualised. The decision, the rationale for the additional officers was based on the footfall and volume of people in those parks.
See, this is the problem that I have, is that we have apparently full impact assessments done for a cut which needs to be made, and the decision was taken before the impact assessment was apparently done. And now, as a result of the impact assessment having been done, you need to put in more resource for resource that was there already, which does seem a bit counterintuitive, if you don't mind me saying so.
So there's always... So the resource will be in place.
If I can also... I'm happy to accept your answer, but I'll also accept an answer from the Deputy Mayor, who, as I say, is the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for London.
Point. No, I totally accept that. Just, you asked when the resource will be in place. It will be in place by the 1st of November.
By the 1st of November, we will have the equivalent of 15 new officers for...
I said you'll have the extra resource.
You'll have the extra resource. OK, the problem which I think, just to finish on, Chair, if I may, is that we are seeing decisions apparently being endorsed by decisions being taken by the Met, which don't appear to be being challenged adequately by MOPAC. We're seeing decisions being taken by the Met without the necessary impact assessments being made, which really should be the tools which you are using yourself to assess whether these are the right choices being made, as I say, as the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for the London area. We've heard that the major piece of work, the estate strategy, hasn't come across your desk yet that is going to form a vital part of your capital budget for police and crime and for the Met's capital budget for police and crime. So my concern is that we are not seeing proper oversight of decisions being taken by the Metropolitan Police, by your department, which exists pretty much solely to give that oversight. So I do wonder at the moment, what is the point of MOPAC?
I mean, I think that's obviously a purposefully negative portrayal of my work.
If you can find a more positive spin, I'd be delighted to hear it.
It's not spin, it's my day-in-day
positive interpretation.
Chair, may I answer the question?
Assembly Member Roberts, please let the panel member answer.
For example, on this very issue of royal parks, we have repeatedly gone back to the police to test their workings and mitigations for issues around the police. Obviously, concerns around particular understandings of typology, of wildlife, of additional ceremonial duties have all been discussed. Those are things that we have actively done. Same will be definitely happening with front counters. It is definitely our role to give additional, to give oversight of the work of the Metropolitan Police as they take these difficult choices that will impact Londoners. That is exactly why we're here, is to do that work. And I think that I do that work day in, day out, to make sure that these are really difficult decisions. Of course, they need to be challenged in their assumption and understood what, based on the data we're seeing, what mitigations will be taken, because it is under all of our statutory duties to live up to the protection of Londoners.
But you would agree, at the moment, the scenario that we have is the Metropolitan Police takes decisions and then just comes back to you for for some greater level of scrutiny, certainly, but the decision by that point has been taken. That's scrutiny after the decision.
It's ongoing scrutiny. The original decisions were discussed with us in the devising of the tough choices. Our prioritisation around neighbourhood policing, around public protections, areas of concern that came directly out of the HMIC report were taken at that decision. We obviously know that the budget allocated, the prospect at that stage, and the underfunding that has happened previously has led the Metropolitan Police to be in the situation where there is no choice but to make stark decisions. So in that context, those discussions were taken from the beginning and continue to be taken going through, using our continual oversight to make sure that we're taking the best possible choices in difficult circumstances to do the best to serve London.
Okay, just as a final question, did you veto or overrule any of the difficult decisions, or were they all passed through?
No, we definitely have moved forward on some decisions. We know that the original tough choices list that was presented previously has decreased. We know that the additional money...
Was that a result of the money, or as a result of your intervention to say, no, that is a line I will not allow to be crossed?
The original tough choices, you'll remember, it was an amber rated, and we've looked through all of those, and there was definitely decisions that were taken to move away from some of those in its original form. And as the money has come through, we have continued to push on those in.
The microphone went again. Do you want to try? Let's run up at that. No?
Is it working, Deputy Mayor, again?
No. OK, thank you, Chair.
Third time lucky, perhaps.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Let's just get this mic sorted out first, please, Assembly Member Hall. Is that working, Deputy Mayor? Yes. Right, yes, the Assembly Member Hall.
Very quickly, you told Assembly Member Roberts that you've seen a couple of these impact assessments. Can we have sight of them, please? And can we have sight of the others when you get them? Because we would have hoped that we could have had sight of all of them before these terrible cuts are taken. So can you agree now to get those sent to us?
I would have to request that from the Commissioner, but I'm happy to request it.
OK, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. One of the areas that's obviously been developing a lot in recent years has been technology, and I can remember having the debate about whether or not the police should be wearing body cameras, and obviously we've moved ahead with that. Whether we could get the police to stop having to fill in notebooks and to use electronic devices so they could record things more efficiently and more effectively and get them uploaded straight away. And obviously also things like facial recognition and that kind of technology as well, so surveillance. And every second constituent of all of us, I'm sure, has a Ring doorbell, so there's endless amounts of camera surveillance now all over the place. So I just wondered where we were in terms of the amount of money that we think might be coming towards any kind of new technology to help the police with, back office improvements in terms of their performance, or indeed the external technology that is used in terms of fighting crime.
Thank you, Assembly Member Cooper. Yes, in this budget, we've committed 281.2 million towards digital data and technology for the Met over the next 4 years. That will be spread across the following areas: IT and core infrastructure, that's replacing of end-of-life equipment; IT replacement programs, which is refreshing devices, as you have mentioned before, like laptops, radios, on an ongoing replacement cycle, and then contributions to the Home Office's Emergency Service Network and National ANPR Service Programme, and we will also, there will be, in addition, £84.2 million will be invested over the next 4 years in the new command and control system, which is essential in answering 999 calls. And in the spending review, as you rightly note, it's technology. Even in this meeting today, we note the use of possibly using AI going forward. So in the spending review, we've requested an additional 85 million to allow more advantages through tech.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that there's money going in, both from the mayoral precept and also that you've been requesting more from the government. However, having had various of these discussions in the past with the Met, there have been difficulties, let's just say that, with some of the previous implementation. And obviously part of the MOPAC role is going to be monitoring that we are getting value for money in terms of the procurement, but also the deployment of new devices, new laptops, new radios, whatever it is going ahead in a timely fashion. So how is MOPAC going to be scrutinising the Met going forward? And I have to say the history, in my opinion, from previous discussions over the 9 years that I've been an Assembly member, has been a bit woeful in terms of the Metropolitan Police implementing new technology. It's not been good.
I mean, we definitely do continue to look at the implementation of these sometimes huge allocations of funding, but also new systems. We all know from our own lives, every time there's a new IT system, it takes, time to embed, and we're talking across, obviously, a ginormous workforce, and actually the current command and control system, it's not called that, but the system they use to answer 999 calls currently was created in the year I was born. So we're talking about very outdated systems. It's huge amounts of funding and implementation to get this right. We do have very strong oversight in these areas. We know, for example, that we see through our data in terms of reporting the issues that have happened previously with some of and I think we've discussed it in this committee, some of the new technology systems around Connect. That is something that, we see in the data, and we directly challenge on the improvements of those, and we will continue to do so. I think I'm clear that as well, that going ahead, when we're using more tech-enabled issues, that we need to have a real clear framework around our role as MOPAC within that, from what may be seen as small administrative use of AI to obviously something larger like LFR, that we need to have the right proportionate level of oversight in that space. And I think we might come on to talk about it, but it's something that we're working through with the ethics panel about what we need to see in line of that oversight.
So maybe, thank you very much for that, Deputy Mayor. Maybe, Kenny, we could drill down into the detail of how that scrutiny is going to take place as these new things are implemented and deployed, making sure that we're still getting that value for money. Because I know that, there have been a lot of delays in the past, and obviously, more and more tech-enabled crime, more and more tech, cybercrime and so on and so forth, but also using, we started the meeting by talking about AI assisting us with the note-taking. Obviously, big data and mining through all of that information can be done very quickly by, computers in the way that, in these large models that learn all the time, whereas, 6 humans might have to take thousands of years to come up with something. And obviously it's very helpful with enabling us to discover, wrongdoing, sometimes of very significant proportions, up to what terrorists are doing. How are we going to scrutinise what the Met are doing with this implementation of using this money that, if we get the budget through the CSR, but also the additional money that's going in?
So I think there's 4 ways, probably. I'll probably think of others as I'm talking, but the 4 ways that immediately spring into my head are: 1, it's you actually should be having a sort of ethical framework through which you're looking at it to begin with, which is something we did with live facial recognition by asking the London Police Ethics panel to have a look at this. That is something that they are going to be doing for AI. It does for AI because it does raise understandably, given the level of data and personal information that the Met holds, quite a lot of difficult questions. So that is something that they're going to be looking at as part of that. The second thing I would say is about how do you scrutinise something is, on a systematic basis, you would want business cases to be done in a standard professional way which sets out benefits to be measured in the same way, and make sure that that is actually happening, so that before something happens you're clear what you expect from the value for money and you know what the outcome is going to be. Quite often what goes wrong with programmes is scope creep, or stuff gets in, or there hasn't been a clear set up and a programme's not been set up in the right way. So I think that is quite a clear element that I would look at. The third thing I think you then have to look at is whether the benefits of that are actually tracked through, and that comes from setting up the programme in the right way with a clear articulation of what those benefits are and are measured in the same way. And that then if you expect to see the benefits, quite often it's a productivity gain or it's an efficiency saving, and by productivity I mean more with the same amount of people, by efficiency I mean the same with fewer amount of people. Is that then tracked through into the budget so that people don't just roll them over, because that's a classic thing which can often happen. And then the fourth thing which you actually need to do is look at, and those are kind of more systemic ways of looking at things. At the same time, I would be looking at, do we think that there is the correct transformation capability which is within the Met? So do they have the right skills to deliver all of that? So they're the kind of 4 big ways across the piece. In terms of the 5th way of how you would look at this, which is you actually would look at the individual programmes, see what's happened with them. And no programme is going to go 100% perfectly. It just doesn't. That's the way life works. And it's about how do you then learn the lessons from that, and can you see and check that that is actually being rolled back into the future planning and stuff. And a lot of that comes from discussions with the front line. For example, when they implemented Connect, if you went out to custody after drop 1, you would hear very clearly what the issues were around stuff going through the criminal justice files and everything. So I think that genuinely is how you look at that in terms of the value for money and the setup of all the programmes.
Thank you. And I presume that that is something that MOPAC is going to be staying on top of, making sure in detail that that kind of implementation is very deeply scrutinised by yourselves. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next questions, I'd like members just to be aware of the time, please. We have quite a few questions to get through, so if your question has already been answered, please restrain yourself from asking it again. And if we could be succinct. Assembly Member Lord Bailey, I think you've remembered now that we've swapped the questions round, so over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. How much extra funding is needed for the Met to reach its target to grow to 38,000 officers and 19,000 staff, Deputy Mayor?
So that's based on the 1.52 billion that would see the Met grow its workforce to 49,614, of which 33,432 would be officers. The ambition to get to 38,000 officers and 19,000 staff is obviously based on the ratio of 2.1, which has been set out as the average across England and Wales, and would put us in line with New York City.
Yeah, but how much money do you need to do that?
So that's the 1.52 billion that's gone.
So is that 1.52 billion, isn't that what you've requested already this time?
Yes, that's for the period over the spending review. That's what the Met consider can be recruited to over that period. Therefore, that's what we've taken. That's what we've calculated at this moment. We haven't looked beyond, given it's not realistic at this stage to recruit to that, what the longer-term ambition would cost, and that will depend on various factors, sort of way beyond a mid-term financial plan, which we would need to look at in due course.
So, Deputy Mayor, you're telling me there is no figure for getting to 38,000 officers, 19,000 staff. Is that what you're saying?
So the budget that we've put in would get us to 49,614 by the end of 29.
Yeah, and I'm asking, what's the bit you need to get to your 38?
So that's understandably, when we're putting in these bids, what we do is look at what's realistic over the time frame we're being asked for the money for. That, if we got that money, that would take us up to 33,432 police officers over that period. At that point, we come to new spending review. We would look at the wider factors, but that wouldn't affect that there's an ambition to get to 38,000 and 19,000. And at that point, we would start again recalculating the cost to get there.
So what you're saying is, Deputy Mayor, there is no figure to get to that, but that's not extraordinary. You will calculate that when that happens. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, it would have been very helpful if you had just said that. But doesn't that mean that then getting to the Mayor's manifesto pledge of 1,300 additional officers, you're behind? You're never going to make that now, are you? That's a fantasy, isn't it, from this point on?
No, because we've already seen the additional officers we want to see to the front line. I think from memory, that's been an additional 552 dedicated ward officers and 230 approximately PCSOs in this year alone. So we're actively working towards increasing those numbers, and obviously that will continue with the funding that we have now to increase those neighbourhood officers, and if we get the money through the spending review in line with that, we can go further.
So if you don't get the money from the spending review, you will have to cut officers, is what would be the inference from what you've just said?
Well, that's basing on hypothesis, so we need to get the funding through, and obviously the priority for all of us is making sure we have those neighbourhood officers. So that's what we're working, that's the thrust of the commitments we're working to.
It's not obvious what the priority is. The priority is for you to tell me. That's what I'm asking. I'm making the assertion, right, that if you don't get the money that you've asked for, which is entirely possible, you will have to cut officers. You can tell me if that's yes or no because of what your priorities are, or the Met's priorities in the conversations you've had.
I mean, I can be unequivocal in making it very clear that the Home Office's priority, the Mayor's priority, and the Commissioner's priority is putting officers back into the front line, into communities, into neighbourhoods. We're all fully aligned on that. And given the Police and Crime Plan outlines that for the next 4 years, that will continue to be our priorities, and we will make sure the budgets align with that.
And just for clarity, the Mayor's manifesto commitment did relate to 1,300, not just officers, but officers or PCSOs within the neighbourhood teams, which aligns with the Labour government's neighbourhood policing pledge on that front.
Right. So because it is very important to understand where the Mayor's priorities are, if these officers would be cut or not. That's very important. It isn't obvious. We need to be told that, because we've been told in the past about numbers that haven't materialised. Anyway, I want to move on to a slightly different subject. What oversight is planned for the ethical operation of the use of AI facial recognition and other advanced tools? I asked the question because certain communities in London will be more exposed to this AI facial recognition, i.e. younger people, homeless people, people from ethnic communities, because they work longer hours, they're out longer. There is an argument that these models are built by very safe middle-class people who have no real understanding of what it is to live the way other communities do. So we will really need MOPAC to make an intervention, and I want to be very clear. What will you physically, actively be doing to make sure that these tools are used correctly?
Thank you, Lord Bailey, for the question. I think it's an important recognition of some of the ethical concerns around the use of technology, moreover, but live facial recognition. This is exactly why MOPAC commissioned the ethics panel that we work continually with to look at live facial recognition, and they'll soon be publishing a report on these ethical issues, and I've already met with the officers in charge of this operation, but we will continue to do that. And in the way outlined by Kenny just now, our technology oversight will continue and also develop as we move forward with our work to increase governance and oversight, particularly in technology areas.
Can I ask, and I don't mean the literal individuals, I mean the types of individuals that are on this ethics panel, because if you're having more people of the same type overlooking the work delivered to them by their compadres, so how do we get some nuance in there? How do we get some differentiation in view?
So it's the people on the ethics panel. Professor Suzanne Shale is the lead on it. You have other leading academics, mostly ethicists and people like that, and they look at this and provide the framework for it. To be clear, though, looking at oversight of this, we do that in MOPAC in terms of its operation. We go out and see it on the ground. We look at we know that there is very limited, in fact there's no bias if you set the threshold is 0.60, I think it is, which has been confirmed by the NPL, which is the National something beginning with a P laboratory, which looks at all of this. We look therefore at the number of false positives which come through. We look at the arrests as a result of this, and we try and understand what's happening. Now, when the NPL looked at this, they said 1 in 6,000 in terms of the false positives of people going through it would be quite a good, would be to be expected. Actually, in terms of the MPS deployments, we're seeing it at a far lower level than that. So, like, I think it was, 1 in much more than 6,000, which is a very good sign. When we did see a couple of false positives, at one point it was the MOPAC suggestion to the Met that they increased their threshold to make it even more scarce. I think it went up to 0.62 or 0.64. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. That was accepted by the Met, and they have done that. So this is an area where I'm very confident that we and the Met are in lockstep on that, and our oversight is having a real impact on it.
I don't want to get too meta on you, Deputy Mayor, but if the model is built by people who think the same, it will give them the answer that they want. I want to be reassured that you have people in the conversation very early on who are not academics, who are not police officers, who have absolutely no idea how these things work, but know an awful lot about life on the street. Where's their voice in the conversation? I'd respectfully suggest that most, if not everybody in MOPAC is not those people, because you are all, highly trained, well-paid professionals, and I'm arguing for the communities that don't look like that. And I understand Kenny's answer. It sounds great from an academic, sterile environment, but policing live facial recognition will be dealing with people at the grubby, tough end of life. Where are they in this conversation? How is they being brought to it? What is going to happen for them?
I think that that's a really important challenge, Lord Bailey, and I think that that's the reason we want to continue to improve our community scrutiny work, making sure that we've been working intently with the pilot in Hackney, but this is a model that I really want to drive through across London so that we can address those concerns. We do actively hear from organisations and communities who do have concerns in this area, and so in our work to do that oversight, we must be reflecting those insights from those people who have rightly come forward with concerns. And moreover, we try and make sure that the tactics tactics that the police use to positively drive outcomes on crime are taken in the most ethical and high standards possible. And the work that the Metropolitan Police have internally in terms of their independent advisory groups, alongside the work that MOPAC does with our community engagement work, all feeds into that oversight. But I think that we are rightly on a continued journey to make sure that that public scrutiny and community scrutiny is developed.
I accept. I like the concept that it's an ongoing journey. I accept that. That's very welcome to hear. What would be really helpful is to look at the methodology behind these groups and what they're trying to achieve, because I'm really interested in who are on them, because we are potentially have a tool that will be very useful, or we have a tool that might victimise certain people. And what I'm worried is once a person's in the system, anything could happen to them, and if they're incorrectly in the system, that is very, very unjust. We will return to this, I imagine, in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assembly Member Lord Bailey. Before we move on to the two supplementary questions that we have about this issue, I'd like to let you know that we are partly because of time constraints, but because we're now aware that on the question and answer session on the 18th of June, we will be having a senior ranking Met officer. So therefore, the vetting process questions will be asked then, and more appropriately of the Met at the time as well. So the next question is from Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. Just to follow on from some of the questions from Lord Bailey around the live facial recognition. So it was interesting to hear, Kenny, you talking about business cases, because I asked about a business case for live facial recognition and was told that there isn't one. Because it's likely that any spend did not constitute new investment and therefore it sits outside the requirement of IPG scrutiny. So there's no business case for live facial recognition. There's no formal evaluation that I'm aware of. There's no impact assessment, which we've discussed here, and many Assembly members show their support for the need of impact assessments, yet we're seeing it being made permanent in Croydon in the next few weeks. And I think that's incredibly concerning given there's no regulation around it.
So it's a permanent stationing of it in certain areas of Croydon. It's not going to be permanently on per se. So there was the ethical framework around it, which started. 2, there was a national checked what the P stood for, physical laboratory, to look at that from an equalities perspective, which showed how that's done. And there was obviously the Bridges South Wales judgment, which set out the legal framework through which.
But do you think there should have been a business case for it from the Met, considering it is such a new form of intervention that they're using? Should it have had a business case?
So I think. So business case for me means a business case in terms of investment amount. I think the Met will have put together and looked at the operational case for why this should be used, and looked to see whether whether they thought it would be an operationally useful tool, and I'm sure that is something that the Metropolitan Police will have considered.
I just think, given the frame that you put earlier about how important business cases are, to look at creep, to look at how it's used, to look at new technology use, it alarms me that there isn't a business case. But I know we're short on time, and I just wanted to quickly ask the Deputy Mayor. You mentioned earlier that there's a gap of protest policing of 180 million, and I wondered if that takes into consideration the Court of Appeal judgment around the government breaking the law around its use of the more minor disruption framing. So I wondered if it's pre or post that judgment. And also, I know you met with the Quakers of Britain, and I know we're short on time, so I won't use much time explaining what happened at Quaker Meeting House, but I know that they're asking for more kind of guidance around facilitating peaceful protest, but also protecting places of worship. So I wondered if that's happened.
So just on your first question, the 180 million is the police resource required to police the protest. It's independent of the case that you raised there.
But surely if it's more than minor versus serious disruption, there's difference in the amount of police that will be needed for those two scenarios.
So the original Home Office impact assessment of this came about in 2015, well prior to that legislation. So if that has been struck down, we're going back to the basis upon which the 2015 assessment was made. Ergo, there is no change.
Okay, thank you. And
sorry, the question on the Quakers?
Quakers, they are concerned. Well, I know that you met with them recently. It was in your report to say that you met with the Quakers of Britain, and they're worried about, they've been asking about whether this is opportunity for better guidance around protests, which is one of the recommendations from our report from this committee, and also just what's going to happen to better protect places of worship from being raided.
Assemblyman we are straying off the issue of funding now, so perhaps this is something that we can pick up at a later point, particularly as we're so restrained with time. Assembly Member Best, and if you could be quick, I'd be very grateful.
Hard, Chair, thank you. It's only one question. Hopefully, if we can answer, it will be quick. Coming back to the use of live facial recognition, obviously you've been on a journey yourself, Deputy Mayor. It was less than a year ago you were vehemently against live facial recognition. So I speak to you as someone that's in favour of it. Clearly, Assembly Member Garbett is somebody that has more concerns. But I think perhaps if you could explain your journey as how in under a year you've come from a place where you were vehemently against it to being in support, I think that might address the questions around oversight and use and why you are now in support of it.
Thank you, Assembly Member Best. I think actually some of the contributions that Assembly Member Bailey put forward are reflective of some of the original concerns that I did have. I was then the leader of a council from a very diverse community, a community that sent a lot of representations to us about the concerns that they had on surveillance, on disproportionality, and I don't, as I said previously, I think that the tactics that the police use need to be those that keep Londoners safe, do all they can to reduce crime in London, but also are done in an ethical and proportionate and with the highest standards aligned to that. And what is important for me in my role to do is make sure through my oversight that there is that balance of those two things. And so what I have done in terms of live facial recognition is meet with the officers in charge of the design of this programme to discuss how it works, what the concerns. I also have been out to a live deployment of it to see it in action so that I can get a visible understanding of how it is deployed. Had really interesting conversations about how the database is created, how the database is deleted, also the kind of offences that have come through. I think of particular interest, which we've discussed in this committee before, is those around sexual offences and those breaches around violence against women and girls. I think that's really welcome. And also the ongoing discussions with the ethics panel in this area, and understanding, for example, the question that Assembly Member Garbett just mentioned about its ongoing use and, whether it's visible vans or stationary cameras and all of the complexity that goes with that. That is to say that I don't think, and I've said this previously in the committee, I think it's right that those concerns from communities continue to push the Met to have the highest standards around the deployment of their tactics.
Yes, but it wasn't around the high standards. You were in favour of completely ruling out ever using it in London ever. You said you were a leader of a diverse council. You're now the deputy mayor of a diverse city, right? That hasn't changed. And actually, from what you've outlined there, it seems nothing's actually changed over the year, but perhaps as the leader of the council, maybe you could have asked more questions about live facial technology before throwing it out of hand. So do you think, speaking as someone that's made that error previously, that you could do more work to speak to leaders across London to reassure them about this technology?
I don't think that, I mean, I wouldn't characterise it as an error. I think that my concerns around disproportionality is exactly why the point around the accuracy of the cameras has been improved. So
Well, it wasn't error because you said that you went and saw that and saw that you
Chair, am I meant to be answering the
were wrong
question?
previously. So nothing
Assembly
did
Member
change.
Best, could we let the Deputy Mayor answer the question, please? And I am, you know, I'd be really grateful if members didn't cut across panel members when they're speaking. Deputy Mayor, please, could you answer?
Thank you. So I think that the question around the accuracy of the camera, the increase of that accuracy in terms of pixel resolution has been something that had been looked at and responded to because of concerns around disproportionality. I think how it is looked at in terms of one of the concerns that I've probed her on at the moment with the vans, it is very clear that those operations are happening in that area. Will the same level of clarity be driven forward in terms of if it's a static camera? What is the operational deployment numbers that go with these operations? Where is the balance between those deployment numbers as a deterrent of crime to the actual deployment of technology? This is all to say is that my job in terms of oversight is to make sure that we have that level of challenge in the use of all tactics, but in this case, live facial recognition. And on your point about talking to other leaders, I have definitely spoken to other local authority partners about this issue and shared with them the work that we've looked at.
Can I just say specifically Newham and Haringey? I think they're the other councils in London that took the same line that you did last year. Have you had conversations with those leaders and progressed their views?
I mean, I'm happy if they requested that to do that. We obviously have conversations with local authority leaders and local authorities, moreover, through our LHOCs conversations. And I know that other councils who have similar concerns I have been in discussion with.
If I could suggest, perhaps I think it would be really helpful if you did reach out, and because you've been on a journey, perhaps you can take those boroughs on that same journey as well.
OK, thank you very much. I'd like to thank our guests for attending this morning and for answering our extensive questions. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Noted. Can I ask the committee to note the monthly report from MOPAC? Noted. Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from this meeting? Agreed. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme and meeting dates for the 2025-26 Assembly year as agreed at the annual meeting on the 6th of May this year? Noted. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled to take place on the 4th of June, which will be a thematic meeting questioning the Territorial Support Group, so TSG, here in the chamber at City Hall. I have no urgent business.